As the fading light of another Saturday faded into oblivion, parents, dedicated teachers, and giggling students began to make their way to the parking lot. The art fair I organized for my elementary school classes felt like a real success. Since the fair was my project, it was not surprising that there were still many people around who wanted to talk to me. To be honest, someone always wanted to talk to me, and this has been the case all my life, which I jokingly call life. As I looked at the people waiting to see me, it struck me again that no other teachers, not even the principal, had as many people waiting as I did. In fact, the director was one of those who was waiting for me. This did not surprise me, since I knew what she wanted, or at least hoped for. It was important to me to maintain a good relationship with her, so I often did little things to keep her hopes up. Anna, my director, was an attractive woman. She dedicated her life to teaching and working with children, only to eventually realize that, despite her loudly ticking biological clock, she had no children of her own. I think that was my role. It was like something out of a romance novel. A mysterious new art teacher shows up and captivates the beautiful, innocent headmistress, and they lived happily ever after. Sorry, I forgot that this is, after all, the 21st century. Let's rephrase it. It must be the mysterious new art teacher, clearly a bad guy with a hidden past, who comes to town on his motorcycle and secretly has sex with the young headmistress. She finds herself pregnant and helps him deal with secret torments and frightening dreams about the past he is trying to escape. It doesn't matter which option is better, they're both crap because I don't intend to touch another woman for the rest of my life. I've been there, done that, and have the scars on my heart to prove it, and I'm not like those modern theorists who believe that people can fall in love again and again. They believe, wrongly I think, that love is a simple equation that can be generated if circumstances and people are in certain conditions. In other words, if you take two sufficiently attractive people, put them in the right situation at the right time, they will fall in love. Perhaps, given the number of divorces and infidelities, this makes sense. However, I think, no. This theory is complete nonsense, and those who support it simply created it to explain the lack of marital stability of late. I believe that people today often confuse attraction with love. They find someone they like, start having sex, enjoy sex, and then get married. After a few years, inevitably, sex becomes routine and sex is all they had. They need someone else to light the fire and excite them, so they start cheating or simply get divorced. Real, true love can come to a person only once in a lifetime. Our problem is that we are so used to getting what we want instantly that we no longer have the will or ability to wait for it. I experienced my love. It ended tragically, and I will never go down this path again. I don't think I'm physically or mentally capable of going through this again. It took all my efforts to retain at least some of my sanity. True love lifts you to the skies, carrying you on its wings. But always, 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 gravity lurks next to those wings, ready to return you swiftly and painfully to the rocks below. I flew. Damn it, I flew higher and longer than I ever thought possible. So when I fell, it was from a greater height and much more painful than I could handle. I had to die, perhaps, like in one of Shakespeare's great tragedies. We both had to die. We both survived, but it became clear, at least to me, that we could no longer exist in the same world. What am I talking about? Artists should never be allowed to speak. I have just given boring, broad strokes of my whole life, without giving any details to spice it up. I never tell anyone about who I was, anyone. Even Anna, and she truly is my best friend in this chapter of my life, although she doesn't realize it. I'm feeling uneasy this evening. It's almost as if I feel something is coming after me, a shadow of trouble reaching out to ruin my life again. I look around at the faces of the people waiting for me. Besides Anna, there are 3 women and 1 man. One of the women looks very angry, the rest are smiling. The man is one of my colleagues, Jim. We are on some kind of friendly terms. I know what he needs, so I take him first. "Hi, Larry," he says to me. It still takes me a little while to realize that he is talking to me. "What's up, Jim?" I reply. "Before you ask, I'm still ready for our morning run tomorrow at 6 on the trail in the park." Well, I was also wondering if you wanted to go to a couple of bars with us tonight, he asked. Damn it, man, you need to start going out in public sometime. He looks at the women standing at my stand and smiles. Perhaps you have already chosen your horse, he said, looking at Anna. Then, lightly hitting me on the shoulder, he smiles and says, It's dangerous to shit where you eat. A few steps away from us, Anna blushes after hearing part of the conversation and looks away in embarrassment. For a director, she gets embarrassed quite easily. The two women walking behind Jim are simply women from the neighborhood or school district who saw me and wanted to talk. I'm not even sure they have kids in school. They seem a little too young to be mothers. I politely get rid of them and turn to the woman with an angry face. Mr. Martin, did you buy Melissa's painting? She asks. Yes, I did, Mrs. Crane, I told her. She's gorgeous and I wanted her. But she priced it so high that no one would buy it, said Mrs. Crane. Her father was supposed to come to the fair today. She should have lowered the price when he came up. Then he would have bought it. I can't believe you paid $100 for a painting of a 10-year-old girl. What's going on here? She's worth it, I said. It was the best work in the show, and I know art. Just because you're a damn art teacher doesn't mean you know anything about art, she snapped. From behind us came a voice I never expected to hear again. Art teacher. The voice was very loud, and I raised my head and immediately recognized the man. I was sure that he recognized me too, despite the efforts I had made to change my appearance. None of these people know who you really are, right? He laughed loudly. Oh damn, this is funny. Anna, could you take this gentleman inside the school to my office? I need to talk to him alone, I said. I turned to Mrs. Crane. Mrs. Crane, your husband didn't come today, right? I asked. She shook her head. I really don't know what's going on in your family life, and I don't want to know. But I know that your daughter has a huge talent. It needs to be supported and developed. She seemed so disappointed that people came and bought paintings and flower pots and all the other things her classmates did. They looked at her painting a lot, but like you said, no one was going to pay $100 for it. It made her feel even worse. Most of my students did 5 or 6 small projects, and, between us, from an artistic point of view, most of them were worth nothing. Melissa's real talent was so much more complex than everything else here that she only managed to complete one painting. I bought this painting for 2 reasons. The first reason is that it is really worth $100. The second reason is that I would pay any money to see her smile the way she usually smiles. With all due respect, I do not want your daughter's talent to go out in the middle of your family problems. If your husband had come, he could have bought the painting from me. But he never came. Now you have a very happy daughter. She is thinking about all the things she will do with the money she received for her painting, even after the school takes its share. I think you're really angry at your husband for not coming, and you're trying to take it out on me. Is that even remotely possible? As a few tears began to roll down her cheeks, she nodded. Sorry, Mr. Martin, she told me and hurried away. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this family has problems. Her husband was either so absorbed in his work that he did not notice what was happening to his family, or he already had a mistress. In any case, if nothing changes, she will soon be with someone else too. But that someone will not be me. I turned and hurried to school. I quickly walked through the empty building to my classroom with a large workspace and a small office. The light in my office was on. Anna stood there, looking worried. The mysterious man took off his hat. A balding and elderly man sat there, grinning and shaking his head. Anna was worried. I could tell by the way she was fiddling with her hands. Her senses told her that she was about to find out something that she really didn't want to know. I think she thought she would find out that she had hired and was interested in a criminal or worse, although nothing could be further from the truth. The only crime I committed, other than changing the name I was working under, which wasn't really a crime, was leaving a bad situation. Legolas, what the hell are you doing here, pretending to be an art teacher? Asked the man in rage. We've been looking all over the fucking world for you for almost 5 years. Do you know what happened to Carrie after you left her? Do you even care? I know artists are supposed to be eccentric, but it's my daughter we're talking about, damn it, I should have. Wait, wait, please, Anna said. Her eyes were huge, and she became very pale. She walked up to the table and looked at me. I could tell she was picturing me without my neatly trimmed beard and facial hair. She imagined me with short, cropped hair. She even took off my glasses and looked through them. These lenses have no diopters, she said, sinking into her chair. You're not Larry Martin, are you? Of course not, my father-in-law answered sharply. Legola's Ambrose, Anna finished. That's right, lady, snapped Dan Connors, my father-in-law who has known me all my life. But I have no idea why he's here pretending to teach kids art. First of all, Dan, I'm not pretending. I have a master's degree in fine arts and graphic design, as well as a variety of other majors. So I'm more than qualified to teach art anywhere, I said. But why not in some college if you must waste your talent? He barked. You shouldn't be teaching at all. You should be doing what you do best, and you should be with your wife. She's really not feeling well since you left her. I insist that you come home immediately so we can work it out. There's nothing to settle there, I hissed. This part of my life is over. You bastard, he hissed back. My daughter went crazy when you left her for no reason and no warning. I always told her you were out of your mind. All this talk about Mustangs and swords, cowboys and samurai, I never understood all this nonsense. She spent almost all her money trying to find you. She sent private detectives and agents all over Europe and South America to find you. She was dying out, almost drunk because of you, the bastard. Everyone was talking about it when she had to be put in a medical institution, and you never even wrote to her. Recently, things got so bad that we had to put her, your wife, my daughter, in the hospital. She tried to die twice, damn you. This time you were here in fucking Arizona, pretending to be an art teacher with this woman of easy virtue. I can't believe you were less than 2 hours away by plane, and we were looking all over the world for you. Carrie went broke and spent all her money. Her reputation was ruined, and she lost all her clients because she spent everything trying to find you. She told me more than once that, whether I like it or not, she only has 2 options. My own damn daughter told me that her only options are to find you or die. She loves you so much that he simply cannot live without you. And when we needed money, she decided to sell one of your smaller works from your collection. She didn't want it, but she needed money to live. Do you know what she discovered? He shouted. Yes, I said smugly. She found that she couldn't do it. You knew, he said incredulously. You knew. Of course, I said. I did it. So there was no fraud, no legal manipulation, he asked. I have left the management and protection of all my unsold works to Dana, I said. I also gave control and rights to my name and image to her. I also gave her money to start her own agency. I really believed she would be great at it. Dana stopped running her agency shortly after you left, he said. We can talk about this and what she left you later. What do you mean when you say what she left me? I asked. I haven't heard from Dana in about a month, but sometimes we can go weeks at a time without speaking. Dana belongs to the art world, and I don't anymore. I knew that she had closed the agency. I also knew that she was renting out some of my work museums. I was fine with that. Did she run away or something like that? I don't believe it. Dana wouldn't do that. Don't say that, he replied sharply. So tell me what's going on with Dana, I said sharply. Legola's, he said sadly. Dana died last month. She was in a car accident. She fought for her life in the hospital for 3 days. She had no family except. He paused and looked at me. I forgot, he said. You really don't know, do you? Damn, this is all confusing. Some things are starting to make sense. I don't know anything, I shouted. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't help but cry. Anna immediately jumped up from her seat and came to me to console me. She sank to the floor where I had fallen and pulled my head to her. Legola's, what the hell is wrong with you? He asked. You didn't even blink when I told you that my daughter, the supposed love of your life, tried to commit suicide twice. You don't seem to care one bit that she was practically impoverished. This is the woman you loved most of your life, or so you claim. But you start crying and can't even stand when you find out your fucking secretary is dead. I don't really understand what's going on here, he said. You did what you wanted. You were at the top of the art world. I know you were under a lot of pressure, and yes, artists are weird, but what the hell? I mean, all those sword and car gimmicks of yours, it never seemed logical, but you and Carrie were happy. You both worked too much, but you were happy and rich, so what could I say? I also had to admit that you loved her more than anyone else could, maybe even more than me. Hell, in her own way, Carrie was a little weird too. So maybe you were really good for each other. And then, out of nowhere, bam, thank you, ma'am. Carrie didn't say a word, just spent all her time crying for you, trying to find you and drinking herself into oblivion. It took me a while to realize that you cheated on her, he said. I looked up when he said that, but didn't say anything. It took me even longer to realize that you cheated on her with Dana, he continued. It still doesn't make sense. We still don't know why you just ran away. I'm sure it was because of the guilt you felt for betraying my daughter, but damn it, Legolas, you should have faced it like a man. Carrie would have forgiven you 1,000 times. She, like no one else, understood the pressure you were under. And women were always hovering around you like cats in heat. Why the hell did you leave? Making one mistake is not enough to leave the love of your life, no matter how much guilt you feel, he said sadly. I'm just glad I found you now so we can get things back to normal. For a long time, no one said a word. Anna just held me, telling me that everything would be fine. Then I finally regained the strength to sit up and speak. No, I said. He looked at me as if I was crazy. No, what? He asked. No, we won't return anything, I said. We couldn't glue this shit together with even God's personal super glue. Nothing you said is true. First of all, I didn't cheat on Carrie. That's not the reason I ran away. Legolas, you are not a man known for his lodges, he said. That's probably why you're so bad at lying. I know you slept with Dana, you idiot. I can prove it. Let me guess, I said. She videotaped it as a keepsake, and you have a copy. No, son, he said seriously. You impregnated her, and I have your almost 5-year-old daughter living with me. When Dana died and we found out about her, the court gave temporary custody of her to Carrie and me. It had to be both, because Carrie had only recently come out of her depression. Dana asked us to find you and bring your daughter to you. We've been looking for you since she died. We found you through her records, but it still took Carrie a month to adopt her. So the three of you can become a family, and everything will work out. No, she doesn't, I replied sharply. I will not allow my daughter to be raised. I took out my iPhone and started dialing a number. Who are you calling? He asked. To my lawyers, I said. Son, Carrie is not trying to take Arya away from you, he said. She's just trying to find any way she can to be a part of your life again. Anyway, she's already on her way here. Her plane is supposed to land in an hour. Maybe we can all sit down and talk about it when she gets here. I still don't. I don't understand any of this. Why can't you just accept the fact that Carrie still loves you and wants to forgive you? She's even willing to raise and love another woman's child to get you back. Why can't you just accept her forgiveness? I was going to not say a word about it. I never told anyone about that situation. These words had never left my lips before, but I was so angry at how things had turned out that I couldn't help myself. I had backup plans in case Carrie ever found me. I had already prepared for a name change and a new life, but I did not foresee this. I didn't know I had a daughter. Unlike Carrie, I couldn't just leave her. My irritation at having to meet Carrie, at her father's stupidity, and at all the pain that was starting to resurface in my soul finally erupted, and I couldn't hold back. The words came out of me faster and more violently than I expected. Because I didn't cheat, I shouted. He recoiled before the fury of my words. I grabbed a piece of paper from my desk and scribbled my address on it. When she gets here, Bring my daughter to my house so we can sort this out once and for all, I said. It's time to end this once and for all. Legolas, he began. Maybe I don't understand something. We'll find out when Carrie brings my daughter, I said. Then I left. He just stood there in the office with shock on his face. Carrie could never accept reality or the truth. It was so like her to let everyone think I cheated on her. I got into the car I arrived in today, my 2009 Pewter Mustang Anniversary Edition. I slammed on the gas, making the rear tires squeal and leaving a trail of smoke in the parking lot until I suddenly came to a stop. The large Brembo brakes stopped the car instantly. Anna grabbed the door handle and sat down next to me. I've always wanted to ride that thing, she said cheerfully. As we drove through the streets of our small but mid-sized Arizona city, the beautiful colors of the desert failed to bring the usual smile to my face. I chose Randall City for two reasons. First, because it was close enough to Phoenix that I could get everything that any major city had to offer, but also because Randall was small enough to be off the grid for anyone looking for me. Someone looking for me from my past life knew that I simply could not live without things like the internet, good mechanics, and cable TV. It seemed funny that I had given up on the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, but wasn't willing to miss Spartacus to do it. Were you ever going to tell me? Anna asked as I made a sharp turn, forcing both of us into our seats. I got out of the car and quickly walked towards the shopping center. I didn't answer her because I didn't know the answer myself. I took off my glasses and threw them against the wall where they broke. Well, the frame broke and the plastic lenses were designed not to break, but even those cracked in a few places. We've been working together for 2 years, she said, growing louder. She had to run a little to keep up with me. I went into the hairdresser and she followed me. Luckily, the place was about to close. Phew, you're just in time, the man said. I was just about to turn the sign over to closed. I can go back, I began. Nah, I didn't make enough money this week to turn away paying customers, he said. Besides, my wife probably only burned half of my dinner. He smiled as he said this. There was a sparkle in his eyes, indicating that, despite all his jokes, he was ready to give his life for his wife. I'm really sorry for you, I said. He laughed again. Hey, what she can't do in the kitchen, she makes up for in other rooms of the house. If you know what I mean, he grinned. Anna forgot about her growing anger for a moment and blushed. So how are we going to cut our hair? He asked. Just trim it a little, Anna said. We'll need to buy you another pair of glasses. Cut it all off, I countered. He looked at both of us. I'm inclined to agree with the lady, he said. Are you two going through something? No, I said at the same moment Anna said, yes. The friendly hairdresser was dumbfounded. Why do you want his hair to be long? He asked Anna. He's always been like this, ever since I've known him, Anna said. They're soft and lovely. Why do you want them cut short? He asked me. I'm tired of hiding. There's no need for that anymore. I've always liked short, functional hair. It's easier to maintain and doesn't get in the way. I only like long hair on girls, I said. Everyone who knows me and cares about me knows this. Cut it short, Anna said sadly. And can you shave your beard? I asked. He nodded and got to work. Anna seemed to become more and more worried with every curl that fell to the floor. By the time the pile of dark curls had scattered around the barber's chair, she was up again and standing next to me, holding my hand while the barber shaved me. You were never going to tell me, she said. Now I see it. Her holding my hand was nothing new. She started doing this when I got really sick with the flu. I had a hard time getting to school the first day I got sick. I stopped several times on the way home because I was so dizzy. When I got home, I opened the door and collapsed on the couch. When I didn't call the next day, Jim came to see me at lunchtime. I had been there for about a year, and everyone was wondering where I was because I had never missed a class before. He must have called Anna on the way to work, because the next moment she was already at my house. She was always friendly to me. Well, as friendly as I allowed anyone to be. But from the expression on her face, I realized that she felt something more for me. She took off my coat and made me lie down in bed. She crawled under the blanket and took off my pants and socks. Then she started feeding me. She fed me until I started vomiting because I couldn't hold down the food. She always had a bucket next to the bed for when I threw up. On the first day, I was delirious. On the second day, when I still felt terrible, but was conscious enough to try to talk, I looked at her and said, "I'm sorry." "What do you have to apologize for?" she asked. "I didn't call," I said. "I'm really sorry, but it hit me very quickly and I could barely move yesterday." Then I noticed that she was laughing quietly. "Am I suspended?" I asked. "Well, I'd have to suspend myself too," she said. "I didn't call either." "But I think it'll be okay," she laughed. "I thought you were apologizing for the damage to my reputation. After all, I spent the night with a man I'm not married to. What will people think?" That's when she started holding my hand. Since then, when she needs something to hold on to, she holds my hand. At the school's last football game, she holds my hand. If we're having a particularly tense meeting, she'll hold my hand under the table. Sometimes she squeezes it so hard that I think it will hurt me. "After all this time, don't you know you can trust me?" she said sadly. I didn't say a word. I just stared out the window. There were too many questions in my head. I can't believe all these problems came at me out of nowhere. Now I'll probably have to start all over again. I'll miss Arizona. I will miss my small school and my students. And I will really miss Anna. I realized then that she was dearer to me than I allowed myself to realize. While thinking about an exit strategy, the barber continued to shave me. My best hope was to get custody of my daughter if she loved me. The strangest thing was that I already loved her, although I had never met her. I wondered what the child I could have with Dana would look like. In any case, after receiving custody, I will disappear. No tricks this time. I will probably have to move to another country, at least for a while. Maybe my friend Duna will help me settle somewhere in Europe. In a few years, when everything calms down, area and I can return. I'd still prefer to stay somewhere in the Southwest, maybe Texas. "Are you even listening to me?" Anna asked. I don't think she even suspected that I had been disconnected for a long time. I squeezed her hand. I paid the hairdresser, and Anna stood with her mouth open. I gave him more tips than the haircut cost. "I told you it was worth staying open," he said. "And I'm a stranger. I don't know you two or your problems, but from the way you looked sitting there holding each other's hands, I'm sure you can handle what's going on between you." As we walked back to the car, Anna still didn't take my hand. I expected her to do it, but she didn't. She kept looking at me and shaking her head. "What?" I finally asked her. "You're beautiful," she said, "and I'm a fool." "Anna, I'm a guy," I chuckled. "I've had my nose broken twice, and I have a square head. I just cut off all my hair. I look like a rookie, and you're one of the smartest women I've ever met." "Larry, hell, I don't even know what to call you now. Anyway, your features, your face are just gorgeous. It looks even better without all that hair. You're not the same man you were when we entered this barber shop. Your face has changed, your voice has changed, even your gait is different." My Larry Martin remained on the floor of that barber shop, under a pile of hair. I saw a tear roll down her cheek. "And the difference between education and intelligence," she said. "I've been trying to win you over for 2 years, and you didn't notice. Now I understand why. All this time I've been fighting off men, hoping that someday, well, now I feel stupid." She started crying for real. "And what's worse, I'm sure you'll leave. I can see it in your eyes. In your mind, you've already left. You just need to take care of a few little things and you'll leave." "Anna, I swear to you that I would never leave like that. Even if I move from here, I will always be available to you. Even from what you heard there, you should have noticed that I took care of Dana." This conversation ended for a while because we had already arrived at my house. As soon as I was within sight, my barn door opened. "Damn it," Don said when he saw what was inside the barn. "How many of these cars do you have?" Even Anna was shocked. "Is this your car for going to school?" she asked. My attention was drawn to the little bundle of energy that my de facto ex-wife Carrie was trying to hold on to. Carrie's shock at seeing me gave her the opportunity she needed, and the little girl rushed towards me. As soon as she ran up to me, I picked her up. Looking at her dark hair and the shape of her eyes, I knew everything I needed to know. I saw pictures of my sister when she was that age, and this girl could be her twin. "Do you know who I am?" I asked her. "You're my dad," she smiled. "Mom had pictures of you all over the house." She stirred in my arms and tried to get down, so I pulled her to her feet. She walked around me and came back. "Where is your sword?" she asked. "Mom said you always wore it, even when you shouldn't." I just smiled and told her that we have a lot of swords at home. She looked at Anna and walked up to her. "You are very beautiful," she said to Anna. "Will you be my new mom? My old mom went to heaven to wait for me and Dad." "No, she won't," said Carrie, standing behind us. "Hi, Legs," she continued. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" I just shrugged my shoulders and walked towards the house. Looking at the two women was like studying contrasts. Anna was tall and very slender, with ample breasts and long legs. She was dressed very conservatively in gray trousers, a white blouse, and a gray scarf tying them together. Her long hair was combed back and fell to her shoulders. The only decoration was a simple gold chain, which, upon closer inspection, I realized I had given to her. Carrie, on the other hand, was much shorter, but still skinny. She was almost 11 in appearance. She had small, firm breasts and very short hair. Even though she was 32 years old, like me, and 2 years younger than Anna, her hair was combed up and styled with gel on the sides. Her legs were about the same size as Anna's, but much shorter. But her butt was a work of art. She wore a green leather skirt and a matching purple leather top. Her purple leather stilettos had at least 4-inch chrome heels. There was almost no resemblance between them. Aria ran up and grabbed my hand, snapping me out of the comparisons. She pulled Anna along with her. Don looked at us suspiciously. Carrie immediately sprang into action. "Okay, whoever you are, you better go home. We have serious things to discuss to get our family back together. I'm sure you understand." Anna looked puzzled. "He probably won't let you drive one of those Mustangs, but you can ride home in his Jeep. Legs, give her the keys so we can talk." "She'll stay," I said. "Legs, we have a lot to do," Carrie said through gritted teeth. "We have to go through things that no one not involved should know about. I'm not even sure I want my father to know about it. Whatever you do or whoever you're with, while we didn't, doesn't matter now. How about we just say we're even? But it has to end now if we're going to fix this and raise our daughter." "Listen, Carrie, I don't need to." I barely had time to stop. There was a moment of silence as I let my anger subside. "Dad, did you mean to say butterscotch?" Aria asked. "Are we going to make toffee, or is there already one?" "That's a great idea," I said. "I need to talk to Carrie and her dad. You and Anna can make some toffee in the kitchen. Anna, if I don't have something, you might have to go to the store. You can take any of the cars. The keys are all hanging on the wall in the kitchen. The keys to each car are in front of its photograph." "Is your name Anna?" Aria asked delightedly. "I'm smart. Your name is the same as mine. It has a big A at the beginning and a small A at the end. Do you know where Daddy's swords are?" "Well, we'll look for them," Anna said. "But I haven't been through his whole house yet. In fact, I've only seen the living room, his bedroom, and the kitchen." As Aria and Anna disappeared into the house, Carrie couldn't hold back her opinion. "She looks like a woman of easy virtue," she said sharply. She only saw the bedroom and the kitchen. "Carrie, I appreciate everything you've done for Aria, how long you've been doing it. All you have to do is name a price for your services or expenses, and I'll write a check so you can get back on your plane." "What are you even talking about?" Carrie asked. "I'm going to adopt her so she can be my daughter legally, and then you and I will raise her." "Yes, your father told me that you were ready to forgive me and adopt her, but I couldn't believe it," I chuckled. It's not worth talking about," she said. "Yes, it's worth it," I objected. First of all, you won't adopt my daughter. If we go to court, you'll lose. You were in the psych ward for less than a month, right? The only way you got temporary custody was because your father went with you. So it's basically me versus him. I have a blood connection to her. I also have a stable career and more than enough money to support it. As Ivan Drago said in Rocky Roman 4, you will lose. Legs, you have to take me back, she screamed. I love you. I've never loved anyone but you. Your leaving is what made me this way. At least give us a chance. I can do for you anything your blonde mistress can do, and you know it. We belong to each other. We always belonged and always will. I know you left because I hurt you, but baby, I never wanted it. I wish I could say it was just because. Business, but it goes much deeper than that. For most of my life, since we were kids, it always seemed like there was something missing. Not us, we were the perfect couple. It seemed like there were pieces missing in my life. I think I got confused trying to find them. But I couldn't stop. It was like there was a hole inside me that nothing could fill. I know, Carrie, I chuckled. I was there. I understand what you were trying to find. You didn't realize it until it was too late. I don't understand anything at all, Dan said. I thought you told me he cheated on you, Carrie. Dad, I never said that, Carrie said. If you came to that conclusion, it's not my fault. But you let everyone think that, he replied sharply. You never denied it, especially after Dana got pregnant. But you let everyone think that, he snapped. You never denied it, especially after Dana got pregnant. I need to hear the whole story. Who did what? Start from the beginning. I'd like to hear that too, Anna said as she returned to the room. She sat down on the sofa next to me. What about Aria? I asked. She fell asleep, Anna answered. I put her to bed in your bed. I think the guest room is too dusty. I'll have to air it out if you stay. I think she's just overexerted. He won't stay, Carrie said. We're going back to New York. Suddenly, she looked around the living room and her eyes widened in surprise. Did you draw all this? She asked. I nodded. He did most of the sculptures in the back room, and some of the larger paintings too, Anna added. There's even one of mine there. Do you realize how much they will cost? Carrie asked. I thought you couldn't. You worked without. She trailed off. Yes, I chuckled. And they're really good. Can we just get to the story? Dan interrupted. It seems to me that I came to a film that has already started, and I don't understand anything. Okay, Carrie said. You'll have to hear it from both of us, so I'll begin. I nodded in agreement. The first thing you need to know, Daddy and Blonde, Carrie began, is that Legs and I have always been together and always will be. Didn't you two meet in college? Dan asked. Isn't this just the story of two strange art students who get together? Carrie's eyes narrowed. Dad, a big part of your problem is that you never tried to get to know me or anything about me. You were always too busy with your precious son, doing manly things. And how did it end? Steve won't be out of prison for how long? Years. And when you weren't busy with Steve, it was Connie, your little princess, the perfect daughter. I was always just that weird girl you called me, right? Dan tried to say something, but changed his mind. Ever since Mom died and you lost your job, I've been the one providing for you, Dad, Carrie continued. A weird girl with an artistic husband pays all your bills. Connie, your little princess, has, 5 kids and no husband. They just come and go, right? Carrie continued. Can I tell my story now, or are you going to keep interrupting me? She asked. Go on, Dan said. Like I said, Carrie began. Legs and I met long before you ever thought we met, Dad. I met him on the first day of school. We were 5 years old. Do you remember how I told you about my first day of school? Remember how I said the kids laughed at me because I put my shoes on the wrong feet and didn't know how to tie them? Dan nodded. Remember I told you about the boy who made them leave me alone? It was Legs. He always did good things for me. He drew pictures for me, finger-painted, and never let anyone tease me. I think at some point at that level, I already knew that I loved him. This first year in kindergarten, we were together all the time. The next year, our classes were separated, so we rarely saw each other. But over the next few years, I smiled every time I saw him. Then things got worse. We ended up in different high schools. The only way I could find out about him was through that evil little bitch Tammy who lived across the street from us. She went to his school and was in 3 classes with him. She always told me that he would be her boyfriend when she was old enough. She was one of those spoiled little blondes, so I believed her. That's why I always beat her, Dad. All this time I kept some of the drawings that Legs did for me. They were beautiful and showed his talent even then. Some of the messages that Tammy gave me were about how much he loved art and how good he was at drawing, and that his best work was the one he did for me. Then the messages got more serious, and he started asking me questions that I didn't understand. The happiest day of my life was when I met him by chance at the mall the year before. When we started high school, he gave me his phone number and I gave him ours. I called him as soon as I got home. It took him a while to open up, so I just started asking him all the questions I wanted to know. You can laugh at it and call it a childhood crush or whatever, but I knew how I felt. While all my classmates and friends were talking about a new guy every week, I was still infatuated with the same boy, whom I met on the first day of school. She smiled at me and then looked straight into her father's eyes. "Listen carefully, Dad," she said. "I'm going to reveal one of life's great mysteries to you." That night on the phone, I told Legs openly how I felt about him. I told him he was the only guy for me and always had been. He went silent and hung up. I called back to him. He told me that I shouldn't lie to him if I wanted to be his friend. I asked what I lied about. He told me how he sent me his phone number several times, and Tammy told him that I didn't want him. I got angry, Dad. Then he asked me if I loved him so much, why did I never mention the drawings and paintings he did for me? He asked how I liked the one he sent last week. The first painting he made using oil paints, and he made sure to wrap it so Tammy wouldn't ruin it before he gave it to me. Dad, remember how I supposedly lost my mind? Now you know why. I hung up the phone and walked across the street and beat Tammy to a pulp. I remember it like it happened yesterday. I knocked on the door, and Tammy's mom must have mistaken me for one of her friends. I've been to their house many times, but Tammy never let me into her room. Tammy hasn't come home yet, but I told her mom that I left something in her room. She opened the door for me, and I saw them. There were all kinds of drawings, paintings and sketches, and even several paintings hanging around the room. I recognized his works immediately. Carrie had to sit down to continue. Tammy's mom looked at me and smiled. She told me that Tammy's boyfriend always draws and writes for her. I just smiled back, and we heard the door open. Tammy walked up the stairs, and I just exploded, Dad. I'm sure I would have killed her. You know the rest, Dad. That was the first time I disappointed you, Dad. Remember that now. Dan's jaw dropped. I never knew that, he said. Because we never talked, Dad, Carrie said. Anyway, that little bitch never gave me my paintings back. When she found out that Legs and I were dating, she destroyed them all. Damn how valuable they would be now. Anyway, my breakdown cost me more than Tammy. Legs ended up in art school, and we were separated again only in college. We insisted on going to the same college right here in New York. Legs went to their art program, and I couldn't. I couldn't draw a line even with a ruler, so I chose art history. To enter the art program, I had to submit a catalog of works, but I didn't have one. I thought that communicating with Legs would teach me art. Will pass to me, or I will be able to absorb it. It is important to understand that all this time, neither I nor Legs had anything to do with sex. We both loved each other very deeply, and I think even then we did. We knew that we would always be together. We were more concerned with securing our future so that we would never be separated again. We had already decided that we were going to be artists. We also knew it was a hard life. Legs were incredible even then. His professors raved about him. He excelled at everything he did. He wasn't just the best painter in the program or best in sculpture, although he was the best in both, which in itself is rare. He was simply the best artist there, period. They tried to organize exhibitions for him in local galleries before he even graduated, and they were already trying to make money from it. Our first time having sex just happened. Legs were drawing something and kept doing it over and over again. He was trying to capture something in the picture that I couldn't understand. I think that's when I realized that he had some kind of that special level that most people didn't have. I realized then that someday I might become an artist, but I would never be on his level, and I wanted it so bad. We were both upset, but for different reasons. As usual, we tried to console each other. We both knew what would happen next. I knew what to expect from my friend's stories about having sex for the first time, but I couldn't stop myself. "Are you sure we're ready for this?" he asked. I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. Looking into his eyes, I understood what love is. We had been together almost all our lives, but suddenly everything became even more intense. It was like adding a new dimension to our relationship. In the days that followed, I became even more obsessed with legs, if that was possible. I skipped a few of my classes and did some other really stupid things until he sat down with me and talked to me. He said we have to keep our eyes on the goal. It's the end game that matters. We need to finish our studies so we can set the art world on fire. Reluctantly, I returned to my studies, but I spent every free minute with him. We had sex constantly, and it affected him as much as it affected me. He said it made his pictures even more intense. All I knew was that it became even more important for me to be with him. Of course, there were a few incidents with his classmates. None of them were that serious like Tammy's situation, but a couple of them were close. The results of these actions were two things. First, Leg's classmates left him alone. And second, the day before his final art exam, when I least expected it, my life changed. I was supposed to be graduating too, but I was more worried about Legs's exams. I thought I still had a lot of studying to do. I applied to the same art school that Legs had just graduated from. I wasn't sure if my paintings would be good, but I still served a few. The problem was that I compared my work to Leg's paintings, and therefore considered them not very good. My fears were confirmed when my application was rejected. For about 20 minutes, I was the most depressed woman on earth. I returned to the apartment, which I shared with Legs, with the intention of drinking myself into oblivion, or at least as close as possible. I thought that I was ruining all our plans with my insufficient talent. It is difficult to conquer the art world together when only one of you is an artist. Understanding this was the first sign that something was missing in me. I thought that a part of my soul was missing, the part that gave me that special look that all artists have. If only I could get those back. Pieces, I would become a great artist. I would become whole again. As soon as I entered the apartment, my plans changed. The first thing I noticed was that Legs had rose petals scattered all over the floor, creating a little path around our living room. He placed 3 or 4 of his canvases around our apartment. It smelled so wonderful that I just dropped the bottle on the floor. Forget about drinking for comfort. I decided to have sex to get rid of depression. I followed the path that Legs had prepared for me. I walked up to the first canvas. It was a picture of me that I had never seen before. In the picture, I was lying on pillows. The image was so vivid that I could swear I saw how I breathe in the picture, and the expression that he captured. I looked so satisfied and happy. I have never seen this expression on my face before. I should have asked him about it. For some reason, this picture always excites me. Later, I found out why. I moved on to the next canvas. It was even more incredible. It was a cityscape. It was huge and very detailed. I had seen a sketch of this painting before, but had never seen the completed piece. In addition to the buildings, which were beautifully depicted, you could see people walking along the streets and doing all sorts of things. It was one of those pictures that you can look at endlessly and see something new every time. I think I stood in front of it for a long time. After staring at the painting for a long time, I came to the last canvas. It was empty except for a card in front of it that said, "The Future." I looked at it carefully because I didn't understand what it meant. Then I noticed a string hanging from the top of the easel on which the canvas stood. I gently pulled the cord, and it rose up. I pulled even harder and found that there was a beautiful ring attached to it. Legs came out of the next room and smiled at me. "Is this for me?" I asked. He simply nodded and smiled at me. "Legs, you don't have to give me a ring to get me into bed, stupid," I chuckled as I began to unbutton my blouse. "We'll be together forever, idiot." "And that's why I want you to marry me," he said. When he said that, my head just exploded. I missed everything. But you have to understand that Legs always surprised me and made little romantic gestures for me. We didn't have a lot of money, but he gave me all his love and all his free time when he wasn't working on his art. I started screaming and couldn't stop. All thoughts of my refusal were forgotten. Later, he explained a few things to me. Legs explained why the canvas with the words future written on it was empty. He said it was because we would paint our future together. He didn't know what it would be like, but he was sure that it would be wonderful. And so it was. Another thing he explained to me was the picture of me. He said that this is what I always look like right after we made love. He liked to look at me at such moments, and also when I fell asleep afterwards. He tried very hard to capture this image. No matter how much we were offered for this painting, we never sold it. It was always my favorite painting. Anyway, we got married and our wonderful life began. Legs almost immediately sold several works at local art shows. With the money he made from these works, we began to move forward. I won't say we never had problems, but they were very rare and minor. Legs adored me and I adored him. I remember one time I got a tattoo. I got his name and a little heart tattooed on my left shoulder. As soon as I entered the house, he just went crazy. He asked what happened to my shoulder. I proudly showed him the tattoo, and he looked like he was going to cry. He said that my body was too perfect to be damaged or disfigured. He liked my body the way it was. I didn't need any marks on my body to attract attention or become more beautiful, because I was already beautiful. He said that in his opinion, tattoos make women look like circus performers. For those who are desperate for attention, it took many expensive laser treatments to get rid of this tattoo. It was one of our biggest problems at that time. Legs almost immediately caught the attention of one of the most powerful agents in New York. Rumors about Legs had already begun to spread. We deviated from the typical artist path, accepting commissions from several wealthy collectors and even some corporate clients. For several years, Legs steadily climbed the ladder of artistic success. He became increasingly famous for both his sculptures and his paintings. We always reserved his best works for his annual exhibition. To avoid undue attention, Legs did only one exhibition a year. His agent also began to promote Legs as a person. Legs's habit of dressing exclusively in black and his fascination with Mustangs set him apart from typical artists. He also carried a sword with him wherever he went. Neither went. His eccentricity made him even more in demand. As he became more famous, he began to associate with other famous people, both in the art world and outside of it. It was not unusual for me to come home and find almost anyone in our living room. I still remember walking into the house one afternoon and seeing a petite woman looking at Legs' latest work. She was dressed like a character from a comic book. She had the same gift as Legs for choosing colors that seemed to match, don't go together, and make them look great. I watched as she walked from picture to picture, sometimes nodding and sometimes shaking her head. I still had problems with jealousy. "Hi, Carrie," she said when she saw me. Her heavy French accent made me freeze for a moment before I started attacking her. Then I heard the sound of one of Legs' Mustangs, but it was louder than usual. I looked out the door and saw Legs driving his car down our driveway, followed by another Mustang I'd never seen before. "Boys and their toys," the woman said. She was incredibly beautiful and even smaller than me. I suddenly realized who I was going to beat. It was one of the most famous artists in the world, Amanda Anderson. Amanda was from France, but now lived in Florida with her husband and partner Raph Jenkins. I had admired this woman for most of my adult life, and even now copy her style, but there she was in my living room. She came to talk not only to Legs, but also to me. It was Amanda who suggested that I, rather than our current manager Darren, represent our business interests. She had been dealing with Darren and his agency and no longer trusted him. I started to take more interest in what was going on, and eventually I actually took over Legs. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made, but probably also the biggest mistake. It was incredibly satisfying. Instead of just being on the sidelines as a wife, I became an important part of the team. It made me feel like I was contributing rather than just observing. At first, I did everything for Legs myself. I organized his meetings and interviews, chose where we would go and where we wouldn't. I also helped him choose which corporate orders we would accept and which we wouldn't. By then, we were already married for some time. That time and still loved each other madly. The biggest problem was that I still didn't see us as equals as much as I would have liked. Legs' star continued to rise, and I was relegated to the background again. I had completely given up painting by then because I just wasn't good enough. I began to obsessively search for that part of my soul, or maybe several parts, that were lost. If only I could find these missing parts, then my artistic talent would blossom to its fullest. Perhaps not as brightly as my husband, but there would still be something that I could do that no one else could do. We met a lot of different artists during our travels and work, and I was constantly looking for something that could become my niche. I also constantly interacted with different types of artists to get exposed to different forms of art that could one day become my specialty. I suppose it was inevitable that other artists who wanted to take advantage of my husband's success would begin to think that I was somehow responsible for his success. Some of them began to think that if I could represent them, then perhaps I could bring them a piece of his success. Legs was completely supportive of me. He always supported everything I liked. Within 6 months, our lives had completely changed. By that time, I was already representing 5 or 6 other artists besides Legs. I began to become arrogant and stopped giving Legs as much time as he needed. I was so busy with other people's affairs that we no longer had time for each other. I think that's when she came into our lives. At first, I didn't pay attention to her. After all, she was simple and a little plump. Who would feel threatened by such a person? It took a while, but she just took over Leg's life. Everything about his career and even his personal life now went through her. There were several times when I had to remind her that I was his wife and she was just his assistant. I tried to fire her a couple of times, but she told me that I can't fire her because I didn't hire her or sign her checks. She even told me once that I was stupid for what I was doing. I explained to her that I represented the largest collection of artists in the United States, so I knew exactly what I was doing. She shook her head and just laughed. She asked me how many of these artists actually make money. I just stared at her. She said I wondered how long it would take Legolas to realize that he was subsidizing my mediocre artists. I was literally taking money from him to support a group of artists who didn't have a fraction of his talent. If I were such a smart businesswoman, why don't I focus on my main asset and not on other clients? She said it proved that not only am I a bad businesswoman, but I'm being stupid as a woman too, doing this to a man who loves me the way Legs loves me. She said that if I continue to act stupid, I shouldn't be surprised if someone who would treat him the way he deserves takes him away from me. Then I realized she was in love with my husband. I went crazy. I hit her. She just stood there and looked at me and then left. I think I should have stopped then, but I didn't. I was drunk on power and couldn't let go. This was my niche. This was my way of influencing the art world. Dana and I just coexisted for a long time. I think that's when the rumors about me started to spread. It was a really crazy time for both of us. That's when Legs got a sculpture commission for the Commerce Bank. I was doing several interviews a day. Legs had never told me before that he didn't like my absence or the decrease in the time we spent together, and then he didn't say either. He was always immersed in his own little world. He was so passionate about his art that I was sure that he did not notice what was happening around him. I knew I had to stop. This realization came to me suddenly when I walked into his studio, or tried to do so, and found that I couldn't find him. He moved his work area to a new studio, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that. I decided to be home that evening when he returned home, and I noticed in his look that something had changed. Until that evening, every time he looked at me, his face lit up with a smile. This man, whose vision led the world, is delighted. All he ever wanted was to spend time with me. We had dinner together, and my guilt was palpable. I didn't know what to say or what to do. After dinner, he went back to work on a sculpture. Before he left, I told him I wanted to go with him. He told me that I'm not ready to show the sculpture to anyone yet. I was crushed. He always liked it when I looked at his work and gave my opinion. He also looked very sad. The next day, Amanda came to my office and we had an argument. She was very angry with me. I think she felt partly responsible for what was happening, since she was the one who pushed me into managing artists. That was the last time she spoke to me. Even later, when I needed friends, she and Raf were among the first to cut me out of their lives. I was always confident that I could fix everything. I guess I was like a smoker. I was confident that I could quit at any time. I decided that after completing the order for Commerce Bank, Legs and I would just go on a long vacation, and that would be it. Let's fix it. This would give him time to finish the sculpture, and I could sign my new client. This new client was Danny Wainwright. I was sure he was going to be the next big artist. In fact, he was kind of a cheap copy of Legs. He didn't do sculpture, only painting, but I was sure I could get him on. One of the reasons I was sure of this was that, like Legs, Danny was more of a personality than just an artist. By being interesting, he attracted more attention. I found out later that he was more interesting as a person than as an artist. I saw him at a small exhibition in New York and approached him. It was the beginning of the end for me. By that time, Legs had simply withdrawn into himself. He hardly spoke to me, and when he spoke, it was always in some mysterious way. I realized later that he was trying to warn me. Like with the tattoo, he didn't know exactly what I was doing, but he knew that I was doing something that was harmful to us. Instead of dealing with Danny the way I usually did, waiting for him to approach me, I decided to go ahead and just follow him. I couldn't imagine that he wouldn't want to use my services. I did everything for my clients so they could just create. In most of these cases, I did what I shouldn't have done. Imagine my surprise when he laughed in my face at my offer to represent him. And he did it publicly at an exhibition. That he did it in front of people involved in the closely knit world of fine art made it even worse. "Thank you, but I prefer my art to remain pure," he said loudly, attracting the attention of those around him. "I don't need a woman of easy virtue, no matter what other benefits she brings me." Everyone in the room knew who he was and who I was. Like I said, it was the beginning of the end. I just walked away from him looking dumbfounded. Looking around, I just saw grins on most people's faces. The funny thing about the art world is that everyone watches everyone else. In some cases, they want to see you succeed. In others, they just want to be there for you. To see you fall, I could tell by the looks on the faces of most of those present that I was heading for a sharp and steep fall. I needed Legs then more than ever. I drove home and ran into the house, but it was empty. I called his cell phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. I called back again, hoping that he had just missed the first call. The third time I called him, the phone was answered, but not by him. "Why are you answering his phone?" I asked. "Why are you trying to call him in the middle of a shoot you were supposed to be on?" she hissed back. "Dana, what are you talking about? I need to talk to my husband right now," I told her. "Carrie, you've really lost touch with reality, haven't you?" she asked. "You're supposed to be the person who represents him and handles his business, so why are you calling him in the middle of his first appearance on Letterman?" She hung up and I collapsed on the floor. How could I forget about this? Legs was on a 3-day promotional tour signing copies of some of his early work. He was also scheduled to appear on Letterman and a couple other talk shows to drum up interest in him before unveiling a sculpture for Commerce Bank next month. How could I forget about the most important block of his career to date? What made it even worse was that when we scheduled these appearances almost a month ago, he begged me to go with him. He was very nervous and almost afraid to go. He thought he just wouldn't appeal to a wider audience. Art is not an entertaining art form. This is a more personal activity. I then realized that I had let him down again. I took out the bottle and started crying. For the next few days, I stayed home, trying to avoid people. Legs wouldn't answer my calls or pick up the phone. Even Dana wouldn't answer his or my phone. I tried calling Amanda, hoping she could stand up for me. Her assistant accepted the message and only said that he would convey my request. I knew what it meant. Amanda never refused to take my calls. Obviously, she was moving away from me. I knew not to even try to call Raphael. No matter what his wife did or felt, he followed her. They were as close as Legs and I once were. Were there? Even saying those words hurt me. There had to be something wrong with him. He had to know that there was no one in the world that I loved as much as him. Many committed couples grow apart when they immerse themselves in work. It was our dream. We always planned to conquer the world of art. Maybe we didn't do it the way we expected, but we did it anyway. I told myself that from now on I would put Legs first. After all, he was my most important client. It was only fair that he would receive the most of my attention. I went to our home office to check his schedule for the next few days. Our home office was quite large. We both had huge desks facing each other. I wanted them to face outwards. Legs immediately moved him. I think I was wrong again. I tried to explain to him that the tables side by side symbolized that we were a team, and we represented a united front. I think I saw it as an us against the world statement. Legs just laughed and said that in our own home, we don't have to fight anyone. Then he smoothed my hair and kissed me. He told me that he liked looking at me. I looked at his desk and couldn't find a copy of his schedule. The only thing I could do was wait for him to call me or come home. Meanwhile, I was getting a lot of calls from my clients about what they needed. I started answering their calls and discovered something I hadn't noticed before. As mentioned, Legs was the only one of my clients who was actually successful. One of the things I've been doing lately is posting my best work to some of my other clients at Legs's performances and shows. It made sense because people who came to see him or his work might be interested in other artists' work. That morning, I received a call from not one, but 4 of the 5 artists whose work I plan to use in addition to the Legs sculpture at the Commerce Bank opening. They were very upset. They were informed that their work would not be shown. This was news to me. I was sure that all the details of the opening were agreed upon. I decided that there may have been a glitch at the bank. I called my contact at the bank, and they told me that several changes had recently been made. He said that he would contact me to provide the name and number of the person I need to contact to sort things out. I was furious. I thought I was the person responsible for what happened at the opening. After all, I was the one who convinced Legs to take the commission. Legs, of course, came up with the idea and designed the sculpture, but I took care of all the details. As soon as I finished the call, my phone rang again. I was sure that perhaps the person from the bank had made a mistake and was calling back to clarify the situation. It was my secretary, Joan. Her call made me feel even worse. She started with that, who said that the news of how Danny Wainwright insulted me last night spread throughout the city. She had even worse news. Danny was showing some of his work at the Free Art Fair in Central Park the next day. That they were talking about him, he was invited to appear on a local radio station known as Art Beat. The show was a disaster. The show was originally supposed to promote the fair, but Danny used it to promote himself. Joan emailed me. Email recording of the show. She warned me that I would be upset. Unlike Legs, who was quite modest and let his art speak for him, Danny was loud and brash. He thought that drawing attention to himself would bring more attention to his art. The show's host kept talking about the art fair, and Danny kept trying to turn the conversation around to himself and his art. He practically called himself the greatest artist of our generation. He bragged about how innovative and modernized art was. He talked about how he creates many of his designs on the computer and then draws them. The host found it all boring, but to make the conversation interesting, he changed tack. He asked if Danny was truly the greatest artist of his generation. How did he compare himself to Amanda Anderson? Danny said he was better. The host laughed. Then he mentioned that many believe that Danny is a younger copy of Lagola's Ambrose. Unfortunately, this was exactly what Danny was waiting for. He knew that his work was not even close to the work of Legs or Amanda, so he needed to cause a scandal by making a big one. Statements he could draw attention to himself in a way that his work on its own would never have done. Actually, Danny said, Lagola's and I have a lot in common. Like what? Asked the presenter. Well, Danny said, I'm sure Lagola's and I are the only two artists in town who aren't having sex with his wife. I don't think I heard anything else after that. I turned off the computer and started crying again. I needed to find Legs to straighten things out. I had to try to explain what was going on before I lost my marriage. My phone kept ringing, and after a while I just turned it off. I first tried filtering my calls. I realized what a mistake it was to give some of my clients a home number. I kept checking the phone screen to see who was calling. Suddenly it was Legs or Dana, but I didn't want to talk to anyone else. The next morning, everything continued as before. In fact, I had to go to the art fair in Central Park. Several of my clients were exhibiting their work. I had to arrange transportation and display of their work, but I just couldn't leave the house. I knew that if I appeared at the fair, it would turn into a circus. And so it happened, even without my participation. I learned about it from one of my clients. It must have been about 6 o'clock in the evening when she called. Her name was Chloe Parker. Chloe painted in a style that was very strange. Her paintings were very colorful, and she had her own way of depicting people and scenes. Although her style was very different, she reminded me of Amanda, but only because she saw things differently than normal people. All the people she drew or wrote were distorted or even curved. The paintings were reminiscent of scenes from comic books. I answered Chloe's call because she hadn't called me in about a week, and I needed to tell her that I was trying to figure out what happened at the bank. She surprised me by saying that she not only continues to exhibit her work at the bank, but she had to take them out of the art fair because she was asked to provide more works for the bank gallery at the opening. She also needed materials because since the opening was postponed, she wanted to do some more work. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, and then she told me what happened that morning. She was sitting in her booth with about the last 4 paintings in the show. Several people came up to her to look, but no one else bought anything. She saw Danny's booth. He had about 8 pieces of art in his booth, even though they were only told to bring 3 or 4. One of his pieces was a huge city skyline, which she said looked like he was trying to copy the one which Legs made many years ago. She said it looked amateurish, but he was very proud of it. She tried to talk to him, but he was too busy and rejected her to talk to people he considered potential buyers. Later, when she returned to her kiosk, she heard the sound of screeching brakes and people screaming. She saw many people running towards Danny's kiosk, but could not leave at that moment because there was no one to look after her paintings. She decided that, as usual, Danny was doing something crazy to get attention. I didn't find out what happened at Danny's booth until my brother told me about it. Chloe told me that after most of the commotion around Danny's booth had died down, Legs walked up to her booth. He seemed angry at first, but when he looked at her work, he smiled and nodded. She said that there was a woman with him who turned out to be his assistant. He threw her his sword and sat down with Chloe to talk about her work. He told her that she should keep these works to open a bank because he was sure she would get much more for them there. He asked her how many works she was exhibiting, and she told him 2 because that was all she thought was allowed. She said he told her that I probably wasn't aware of the changes to the opening and that she could bring at least 8 works. He also thought the show would be a great launching pad for her career. He changed the date show on the same day. The opening was delayed by 2 weeks due to what happened with Danny, but he didn't go into detail. He had to make a few changes to his work. He also told her that he wanted to talk to her about her career after the show. I was furious for several reasons. I understood that Legs could change plans if he was unhappy with something, but he should have contacted me first. After all, he was part of my agency. It made me look stupid when some of my clients told me what my husband was doing. It made me look even worse when I had to ask another woman where my husband's new studio was. But what angered me the most was that it seemed like Legolas was trying to humiliate me by doing the same thing I was doing. Everything he said to Chloe about her career sounded like the same thing I told my clients to make them sign up with me. I was sure that he was going to stay alone with her after the show and tell her that if she liked the show, she could get more if she was very nice to him. I became more and more angry. I was sure that he had sex with Dana and was now tired of her and wanted someone new. How could he even pretend to be unhappy with me if he was doing the same thing? Over the next few weeks, the situation got worse. My brother met with Legs and they talked. My brother asked me what was going on. He said Legs looked like he was on the verge of life and death. I didn't find out what happened at the art fair until my brother told me about it. My brother went to the art fair to run into Danny, both because he called me a prostitute and because of what he said on the radio show. He was waiting for the right moment when, like everyone else, the others heard one of the loudest engine sounds ever heard. Legs' red Shelby pulled into the parking lot at too high a speed. Legs made a couple of U-turns in place and got out. Apparently Dana was there too. My brother is a typical man. He described her as cute and busty, which means she had big eyes, big breasts, and a big butt. I still think she's plain and fat. He said she got out of the car and followed Legs. People started asking him questions along the way. When they got to Danny's stand, Legs handed his sword to Dana and took off his jacket. My brother asked me why he never gets arrested for carrying these swords. I had to tell him that celebrities can afford things that will surprise him. Legolas walked up to the panorama of the city that Danny had drawn. It was his largest work. "Do you like it?" Danny asked Legs. Legs smiled at him and said he would do it. Legs then asked him how much he wanted for it. The crowd started looking at Danny's other works. Danny thought he would start selling his works. $2,000, he told Legs. Legs took out his wallet and began counting out the money. Danny was almost ecstatic. "This is my property now, right?" Legs asked. Danny nodded. "Yes, you bought yourself an original Danny Wainwright painting," he said. "Where are you going to hang it? It would probably look good in." But he didn't get to finish because Legs picked up the huge painting and ruined it. Legs then spat at him and said that the next time he says something about his wife, he won't be so nice. He began to tell everyone present that Danny had no talent and his paintings were worth nothing. Everyone who looked at the picture immediately retreated. Danny called Legs as he was leaving and said that as an artist, Legs was too old-fashioned and he represented new, more modern art. He combined technology and art, and Legs was just jealous. I think I was so mad at Chloe that I didn't try to find out anything else. Chloe was the first client I lost. I found out I was no longer representing her the day Commerce Bank opened. For 3 weeks, starting with his promotion tour, I didn't see or hear my husband. I thought he was just focused on all the latest changes in the sculpture. I knew he was angry with me, and I worked out several different ways so that we could overcome our problems. The thought that our marriage was over never crossed my mind. I've been working really hard all these weeks because I decided to sell my agency. It was coming between me and Legs, and I couldn't let it continue. If I went back to handling all his affairs myself, there wouldn't be any more than necessary. I was also sure that nothing had happened to Chloe yet. During these few weeks, I didn't notice, but there were changes in our house. Maybe he did it before he left for the tour, but I didn't notice. Maybe I was so busy with myself that I didn't notice what was right in front of me. On the morning of the opening, I woke up from a noise outside. I looked out the window and saw two tow trucks with a platform, the long one that can transport several cars at once. At that time, Legs had 5 Mustangs. It seemed that he was transporting all his cars from our garage. This was not a good sign. My heart was beating so hard that I thought I was going to die. I ran out of the house and saw one tow truck already leaving. I was dressed only in a robe, which I had hastily thrown on, without anything under it. Him. I barely had time to run up to the driver of the second tow truck when he was securing Leg's car. I asked him where he was taking the cars. He showed me a delivery note with Leg's signature. He had a photocopy of documents for all the cars and written permission from the owner to move them. There was nothing I could do. He also refused to tell me where the cars were going. He was very polite and professional. I grabbed his hand and let my robe open slightly. He noticed immediately. I begged him to tell me where he was taking the cars. I told him that if I couldn't talk to my husband, our marriage could end in divorce. He looked at my chest. I opened my robe even more. They are heading to a major transportation and storage center in the city center, he said. I asked him what the name of this place was. There were several places in the city center where cars were stored. He just grinned and looked down again. I opened the robe completely. He gasped as he looked at me before answering. Dawson International, he said. I asked him if there was any way to stop him from taking the cars. From the look in his eyes, I was sure there was such a way. I shook my head and walked back to the house. I would never do that, okay? I may have already done it, but it was different. I'm sure it was something similar to the sins I've already committed, but I'll never do it again. When I returned to the house, I called Dawson International and was told that they could not give me any information about their clients or their vehicles without the client's permission. I started looking around the house. Most, but not all, of Legs's swords were gone. Not a single one of his paintings remained except the one that hung above our bed, a painting of me that he painted before our wedding. It was still our favorite work. The fact that she was still there meant there was still hope. I felt like I was going to die. I needed to talk to him so badly. Carrie stopped and looked at us. I think she wanted to gauge our reaction to what she said. Anna was engrossed in the story. This was all new to her, and Carrie was very vague in describing what she had done. Carrie's father sat with his mouth open. For years he thought I was the villain. He thought I ran away from her for no reason, or just because I was tired of her. Nonsense, I said. You try to give them your version of what's happening. It's true, Carrie said. It's true, but it's presented in a way that makes what you did don't seem so bad or make sense, I said. You also left out a lot, I continued. Like what? She asked. You practically told the truth until you got to the part about your betrayal, I said. But you left a lot out. Maybe you never knew it or just didn't understand it. So why don't you take a break and let me talk for a while? First of all, I began, you're trying to make it seem like art has always been the main thing in my life. And you're making it sound like we had a grand plan to take over the art world. None of that is true. In fact, I didn't want to be an artist. And art never wasn't as important to me as you make it out to be. Everyone in the room was shocked. Even Carrie's mouth opened. Carrie, the only thing you got right is that from the first day I saw you, you were the most important thing in the world to me. When we were kids at school, I was never the biggest kid in class, or the most I wasn't the fastest, or the strongest, or the prettiest. I had nothing to offer you. I was completely unremarkable. It reminded me of the words of the old song that says, not, ask about my condition. I can't sing, I'm not handsome, and my legs are thin. In short, I was a loser. I would do anything I could to get you to notice me. When we went to art class, I would put everything I had into creating something beautiful. Not for grades or because I liked art, and for you, Carrie. I know it sounds strange because at that age I didn't like girls yet, but I knew that I liked you so much that I just wanted to break up. Every time I saw you. When I gave you that stupid picture and you liked it, that's what made me start making art. It was all about getting your attention. Men have been doing stupid things since time immemorial in hopes. Please some woman. Honestly, I would have quit art that second if you didn't like it so much. In my early years, I could only draw or write when I was focusing on you. During those years when we were apart, everything I did was because I knew we would meet again someday. I started doing martial arts because I wasn't big and I needed to be able to protect you. Somewhere along the line, I became interested in samurai culture. I stopped practicing unarmed martial arts and concentrated on swords and fencing. There is a Japanese saying, Katana wa bushi no tamashii, the sword is the soul of the samurai. That didn't apply to me because, Carrie, you were my soul. But until I found you again, the sword was a good substitute. The closest analog to a samurai in our culture is, of course, cowboys. I think the cowboy mentality somehow translated into a fascination with Mustangs. Even in high school, when I discovered that one of my classmates lived across the street from you, I ate a lot of crap to become her friend so that she could convey my messages to you. Everything I ever did was aimed only at getting closer to you. I started thinking about our future a long time ago. Again, the only thing I was good at, despite my desire or lack thereof, was art. I never wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or any of those assholes. I wonder if I could have chosen to be a cowboy or a samurai. But in this day and age, that would only land me in a mental hospital, so I took the cards I was dealt and did the best I could. Over time, you became so passionate about art that I couldn't stop. It also seemed like we could make a living out of it. I really didn't care if we were rich as long as we were together. I thought I'd continue until then. Until we earn enough to be happy, and then I'll quit. But over time, you started to rule, and all I could do was hold on. It didn't bother me. In fact, I think I even liked that people wanted to see my work, and being the best at something is a real pleasure. But the main thing was always you. I don't know when I started to feel like something was wrong. I think it was when I found myself always at home, painting or doing something for the next exhibition, and you were never around. You imagined all these other artists and always spent time with them and not with me. I know it sounds like I'm a jealous child, and I admit it, I was. Please remember that we were both broken toys, you with your missing parts and me, unable to do anything without your support. I think in some way we both needed to grow up. We both needed to face reality. To me, it looked like I was no longer important to you, and neither was our marriage. If you didn't have time for me or us, then there was no point in me coming home. So I started spending more time in the new studio. I stopped telling you what was going on because it seemed like you weren't interested anymore. I almost became a recluse. I think I fell into a kind of depression. I walked around like one of those goths. I dressed all in black every day. I only carried my black sword and drove my black Shelby GT 500. I started to rely more and more on Dana for everything. But there's something you always didn't understand. Dana, despite what you want to believe, is really beautiful. She has that hot girl next door look. It's different from yours. Kind of beautiful Carrie, but a lot of people might find her more attractive than you. There are so many types of beauty and so many beautiful women. Dana has the typical girl next door beauty. Carrie, you've always had that elfin, punk look like Amanda. Anna is a classic beauty, but none of that matters. After all, you fall in love with a person, not their appearance. But you always missed one thing, Carrie. Dana and I were never more than just friends. I was never in love with her. We didn't have sex. The only one who was in my heart was always you. Your ridiculous jealousy of Dana was in vain. We beefed up security at the new studio due to the cost of the statue. You weren't included on the list because you weren't monitoring my work, even when I was still working from home in the previous months. There were other reasons for the move as well. The statue was huge, and some of the equipment, such as cranes and scaffolding, simply could not fit in the house. To be honest, in some ways I loved it. I'd go to the studio and be alone with my thoughts. Dana hated it. She called the new studio my depression den. I had friends come over a few times, and Amanda and Raph came over a lot. I think one of their visits really made me realize what was going on, and that it wasn't just jealousy, that they were trying to convince me that our relationship was no longer healthy for me. I either needed to change something, or just leave and start over. What I said to Amanda when she asked why I put up with this was like the lyrics to my favorite song, Oceans, by Evanescence. I don't want to be the one who leaves, but I can't bear the thought of another day. I think I finally understand what it means to be lost. I can't find my way out of this. A million miles from where we burned the bridge. I can't keep pretending that everything will be all right when the whole world collapses on me. I listened to that song over and over while I was working on the statue. It seemed to be an exact reflection of what I was feeling. Sometimes it made me daydream while I was working. I imagined all sorts of things. They always revolved around you. I remember dreaming that I was on board a pirate ship. We were sailing fast with the wind at our backs. We were chasing another ship through stormy seas. Everything seemed so real, as if I was really there. I felt the wind tear at my face. I felt the weight of the saber in my hand. I gave orders to set more sails, despite the risk that the wind might tear them. I did not care about my ship or crew. Not even my life didn't seem as important as catching up with that damn ship. Hour after hour, we approached this ship. When we were within gun range, my first mate gave the order to load the guns. "Stand by," I shouted. Then I pushed him onto the deck. "Any man who shoots at that ship will have to deal with me," I shouted. With the help of a telescope, I saw someone tied to the mast. Of course, it was you, Carrie. It was already past midnight. We almost overtook the ship. They fired a volley from their cannons. They did not have the same reason not to fire as me. I lost a third of the crew after the first salvo. The second caused such serious damage to my ship that I was surprised it had not sunk yet. They were preparing for a third salvo that would likely send my ship to the bottom of the ocean when we abandoned the mooring lines. We pulled our ship towards theirs, and the two vessels locked in mortal combat in the middle of the ocean. I was one of the first to board their ship. The saber sang in my hand, inflicting death with every swing. A huge sailor in some form stood between me and the mast to which you were tied. Unfortunately for me, while I was dealing with him, they moved you to the bow of the ship. I ran along the deck, but it was in vain. You were thrown overboard. I knew that the water was too cold for you to survive, like me, but I jumped anyway. I surfaced in water as cold as ice, but I could not find you. I dived again and again, and finally pulled you out, but it was too late. I screamed in pain and despair, but in the end I lost. I was lifted up the side of my ship. My teeth were chattering. I was already starting to go into shock from plunging into the icy water. Before I lost consciousness, I ordered the killing of all survivors. As soon as my eyes closed in my sleep, I woke up, covered in sweat, in my studio. Dana was standing in front of me, and in my hand was a grinding wheel. The grinding wheel was still working, and I just stared into space. Dana asked me if everything was okay. I just shook my head and said I was lost in my thoughts. I shrugged and started polishing the statue again. How could I explain to her that in my mind I crossed the ocean to try to save you? Carrie, at that stage I had no doubt that I would find a way to fix what was between us. I think we both had the same thing in mind. We both thought that I just needed to finish the statue for Commerce Bank, and after that we could try to fix everything. I think in my version I planned to take a long break from work. I did not intend to work for years, if ever. I blamed our problems on the fact that we worked too much. There was no need for that. We had more money than we could ever spend, and it would keep coming for years. I think during that period of time I dreamed a lot, but also worked hard to finish the statue and get our lives back on track. I missed you terribly, until the day came when I had to go on tour promoting prints of some of my early work. These prints brought in a lot of money. We also licensed photographs, wallpapers, video game themes, computer wallpapers, and even lunchboxes were, of course, secondary to getting people to talk about me before opening the bank. I was also excited because you were supposed to go on tour with us. Dana called you 4 times from the airport. She called you 3 times the day before. Finally, we got on the plane and went on tour. That was the end of it all. When you called during the taping of the Letterman show a few days later, Dana told me after the taping ended that you called, but I was too angry to even think about talking to you. That evening, I appointed Dana as my new agent. There were no contracts to sign and no notice to you because I never signed with your agency. Your agency just popped up around us. After Dana went to bed in her room, I stayed in bed thinking about how far Carrie and I had come. Before I knew what was happening, I found myself in another dream again. This time I was on some kind of modern ship. It seemed cheap in design. I was wearing a Navy uniform. I looked around and realized that I was on a torpedo boat in the middle of the ocean. We were heading towards an island that was some distance away. We were moving slowly and without lights. It seemed like we were hiding from something. After several conversations with the men on the ship, I realized that I was again in command of the ship. I also realized that the silent movement was my idea. We circled the island and found a place where we could land without attracting the attention of those who inhabit the island. A few minutes later, I left the ship, accompanied by 4 people. We walked through waist-deep water because we could not bring the ship any closer. In fact, as soon as we went overboard, the ship moved even further into the bay. I looked at the map and ran at an easy pace through the dense jungle. About 2 kilometers into the interior, we came across a group of buildings. There were patrols posted around the buildings, and I immediately knew something was wrong, even in my dream. I had guns. I didn't know anything about guns. What made me realize this was seeing the men we were supposed to be facing. Apparently, it was some kind of WW2 fantasy because the men were guarding the buildings were Japanese soldiers. I looked around for an officer and noticed one behind the building on the left. This building was a good place to start. We went around the back of it. We attacked the guards and killed them quietly. We then entered the building after barricading the door. I left 3 of my men to defend the entrance while I continued to advance inside. On the first floor, I cut the wires, turning off the electricity and plunging the building into darkness. I walked around the building, killing everyone I met on my way. As I approached the last room on the second and last floor of the building, the lights came back on. Standing in front of me was the biggest man I had ever seen. He looked at me and laughed. I took out my pistol and raised it. I could have. I should have shot him. But I dropped the pistol and raised my sword. He nodded and raised his blade. He nodded again, acknowledging my skill. Unlike what is shown on TV and in movies, samurai avoided sword-to-sword contact whenever possible. 2 finely sharpened blades clanking against each other, like in the movie Highlander, would only destroy both blades. I struck my blow. The difference was that my strike was a feint. It was not intended to strike. He stepped back to avoid the blow and succeeded. His mistake was that he assessed my skills, believing that I was using kinjutsu or kendo techniques. Before his feet touched the ground after his slight leap back, I made a lightning-fast advance and a strike. This was a technique very common in European fencing. I heard him laughing at me again. I kicked down the door and went into the room. This time I was late again. All I found was Carrie's body. I screamed as loud as I could and kept screaming. The next thing I remember is Dana standing next to my bed and shaking me, trying to wake me up. She looked at me with a look of worry on her face. I saw everything she wanted to tell me. She was afraid that I was working too much. She didn't want the stress to drive me crazy. I told her it was just a nightmare and that she had nothing to worry about. She reluctantly returned to her room, leaving me wondering what was going on in my head. I always believed that there were things that people just didn't understand. Ghosts, spirits, angels, I believed in all that crap. I was sure these dreams were trying to tell me something. I thought I had it figured out. Dreams tried to tell me that Carrie was in danger and only I could save her. I had to save her, no matter what it cost me. I became even more determined to finish the statue so that we could leave together and find what we had lost. The next day was supposed to be our last day on the promotional tour. I was supposed to sign autographs and talk to people at a local art show. Then the next day we were supposed to go home and I could get back to working on the statue. Dana brought me the radio because one of the guys Carrie was trying to sign to an agency was going to be a guest on the show. Dana was trying to keep me up to date with what other artists were doing and what was going on in the art world in our area. This guy, Denny Wainwright, seemed like a complete jerk to me. He was supposed to be talking about some art fair in the park, but he kept trying to turn the conversation around to himself and his work. The host seemed to have him in line, asking some tough questions. He asked Denny how he compared himself to Amanda, and I laughed without even waiting for an answer. It would be years before he was even considered on Amanda's level, if at all. Someday, to my surprise, the guy said that he was better. I almost tore off my headphones. Then the presenter began to compare him with me. I hoped that he would say that he was better than me. I would be in the same category as Amanda. Since she was kind of my hero, I would be happy with that comparison. But he didn't say that. From Carrie's story, you know what he said. I immediately jumped up and told Dana that we should leave. I had to get back to New York immediately. We flew out that same day and were home in the evening. Dana tried to calm me down. Carrie, you called me several times that evening, but I was even more angry with you. It was one thing that you spent more time with other clients than with me, but I always thought you and I had something special. I really believed all that shit we talked about being together forever. Your cheating ruined that. I guess I was too isolated. I was too closed in my own little world to ever think about it. I guess I was stupid or ignorant, or maybe I just loved you so much that I thought you loved me the same way. I could never do what you did, Carrie, ever. Well, Dana thought she had me calm that night, but we all know she was wrong. I flew out early the next morning and Dana brought me back to the studio. I was dressed in black leather from head to toe and carrying my Golden Eagle katana by Paul Chen. I was driving my black Mustang GT. Everything on this car was black. Even the brake rotors were black anodized. The only things on the car that weren't black were the two fog lights. They were a strange yellowish-green color. They looked like two eyes sparkling out of all this blackness. You all know what happened at the art fair. I lost my cool. But you don't know what happened next. I instructed Dana to inform everyone in the small art community that any gallery or museum that would work with Denny would never receive me work. When Amanda supported my decision, Denny's career in art was over. After a week, he couldn't even find a job as a painter. Nobody would let him get close to a brush. I guess I should feel guilty for ruining a man's career. Maybe I should feel something for taking away from him what he worked for and strived for all his life at that very moment when he first started to succeed. But to be honest, all I felt was anger. I think I blamed Denny for ruining my marriage, when in fact he was just a messenger. Denny did far less to hurt me than you, Carrie, or even your artist lovers. If I really wanted revenge, I would hire detectives to find out how much and with whom you slept and ruin their careers. I would have to meet you and try to hurt you the same way you hurt me. But I loved you too much, and I was actually still in shock. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think. I just reacted. I was about to attack Denny again while he was writhing on the ground, but Dana saved me again. She got me away from him and made me walk around the building to get to the car, while everyone else was looking at Denny. I calmed down a little along the way, and then I met Chloe. It wasn't part of any plan. Our meeting was not planned in advance. The only reason Chloe wasn't excluded from the Commerce Bank exhibition was because I hadn't even heard of her. I didn't even know about her. That you signed contracts with female artists until Dana whispered it to me. Chloe herself told me that she was going to exhibit some of her work at an event at the bank. I really liked her work, and she did too. She was not at all like all these spoiled artists that you usually encounter. I told her, "Well, you've heard this part before." What you don't know is that I was so angry that I didn't just want to physically harm Denny. I had already done that. Besides ruining his little career from a business standpoint, I had to deal a blow to his ego. so I asked Dana to delay the opening. I also held a meeting with the bank management the next day to explain what was happening and the changes I planned to make to my statue. I demanded another $750,000 and invited some of my special friends. That night, while waiting for them to arrive, I cut my statue into pieces when she walked into the studio because she didn't know what I had planned. Over the next few days, with the support of a team of specialists, I worked tirelessly to complete the statue. I know you tried to call me several times, Carrie, but by then it was too late. Much of my anger was directed at you. I think we both realized what was wrong with us. Listening to you now, it is clear that you realized that I knew everything and was desperately trying to talk to me. But it is also obvious from what you say that even then you didn't really realize what you did and how much it hurt me. In fact, even now, years later, I still think you don't understand. So let me explain. From the moment we first saw each other, I loved you. I spent most of my damn life trying to please you. I gave you everything I had while we were together. You were not just my heart and soul, you were everything. Therefore, talking to you was not part of my plans. If we talked, you could. Make me see things your way because I loved you so much. I was like one of those guys in rehab. The only way to get rid of the addiction was to quit it abruptly. So in the weeks that I modified the statue, I didn't. I never left the studio. There were always people there, but I never went out. During this period, I worked harder than ever to make the statue what it was. We worked long days and often late into the night. The only constant person was Dana. Chloe came several times to discuss her work, and we became friends of sorts. In fact, we still keep in touch. But since you and her haven't spoken since she signed with Dana, you didn't know or care. 3 days before the opening, there was only a little bit of tweaking and cosmetic work left to do. I was still polishing and filling the seams because it was vital that they weren't visible. And like all the other times, I let my mind wander and ended up again in another place. This time I thought I was in a hospital, running through the corridors until I reached the room I was aiming for. As usual, it turned out to be a bridge, and again I was on a ship. But this time it was what? It's a spaceship. One of the guys at the controls was talking to me, but I couldn't understand him. The guy next to me pointed to a screen that had a countdown and another ship flashing. He adjusted something on my collar, and after that I was able to understand everyone. We had very little time left before their defense systems turned on again. After that, we would not be able to board another ship. Although in reality I was damn angry with you, Carrie, I still had to try to save you in this dream. I silently followed the guys, and we quickly ran through the ship. The dream was so real again that I felt my lungs burning. I had difficulty maintaining my balance as the ship was hit again and again by some kind of explosion. Eventually, we got to some kind of dock. We quickly ran through a pneumatic pipe that was stretched between two ships. Even before we got to it, the pipe began to vibrate. I quickly ran along the pipe, feeling it trembling with every step I took. My people followed me, intent on helping me achieve my goal. Before we reached the end of the pipe, it began to disconnect from the other ship. The vacuum of space began to suck the air out of the pipe, and us along with it. Gathering my last strength, I rushed towards the airlock of the other ship. I strained as hard as I could, holding my breath. The oxygen was rapidly leaving the pipe, and the lack of gravity slowed my momentum. For a moment, I was overcome by the thought that I had failed. At that moment, what worried me was not that I might die in the endless void space, Carrie. I was only worried that I couldn't save you again. Then, out of nowhere, the first of my men crashed into me. His momentum added to mine, and I made it to the airlock. The next man crashed into him, and I was able to extend my hand to help him up to the deck. Unfortunately, the second man was too far away for us to reach. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate his sacrifice, Carrie, it was just that I was focused on saving you this time at any cost. I was willing to take any risk or sacrifice anything, including the loyal people who follow me, no matter how bad they may seem. I quickly ran through the airlock on the other ship, with my remaining ally following me. When we got to the end of the corridor, we were attacked by several people who looked like stormtroopers from Star Wars. They were all coming out of the same door. To get there, I had to go through them. I looked back and saw my ally shooting at them with a laser pistol. I had no weapon to help him. He looked at me over his shoulder with a look that said, "You're a fool," and pointed to my belt. I looked at the belt, and for the first time I noticed what was hanging on it. It was the hilt of a katana. I took it out and stared at it. There was a button on the hilt. I pressed it, and yes, it was a lightsaber. I was filled with all possible questions, like how the hell the laser just stops at a certain point. Unlike the ones in the movies, this laser seemed to bend like a katana blade. How the hell did they get the laser to bend? My ally tapped his wrist as if he was wearing a watch, which I took as a sign to stop slowing down. So I rushed towards the enemies. When I walked through the door, I heard applause. I looked back and saw him, all this equipment, breathing apparatus, everything. I'm not lying, it was fucking Darth Vader. An inspiring performance, he said, standing up. Above him, on the stairs, I saw Carrie. This time she was alive and breathing. She even smiled at me. I was sure that she knew that this time I would save her. I pressed the button again, and my lightsaber blade glowed again. His sword blade also glowed. His blade was dark red. Mine was pure black light. I didn't think I had the strength to parry the blow itself. "Do we have to fight? Isn't there another way?" he asked. "If you won't just let Carrie get out of here, we must," I said. "She's fine. She's here of her own free will. She created this herself," he said. His voice became louder with each sentence, and this breathing began to drive me crazy. "It's not that I don't believe you, but I want to hear it from her," I grinned. But deep down, I believed him. I started walking towards Carrie, and I think I called out to her before he came between us again. I raised my blade to attack again, but he raised his hand to tell me to wait. "What else, Vader?" I asked. "I just want to get this over with." "You lost," he said. "It was decided before it even started." I thought he was trying some kind of Jedi trick. "Well," I said calmly, "my dad always told me that it's not over until—" "Luke," he interrupted me, "I'm yours." "Who is Luke?" I asked. "It doesn't matter. You are still lost. Look over there." He pointed to where Carrie was sitting. Two stormtroopers stood next to her with their weapons drawn. "You can still complete your mission," he said thoughtfully. There was almost a plea in his voice. "How?" I hissed. He pointed to a shaft leading to one of the vents. It was far from her. I was sure I wouldn't survive the fall. "Jump, and I give you my word that nothing will happen to her," he said. I tried to stay upright as I fell. I woke up with terrible pain all over my body. The swordsman I fought on the pirate ship was next to me and shaking his head. Next to him sat a huge Japanese soldier. Darth Vader came up to me too. "No wonder you're an artist," he said. "The only thing you are good at is to paint little pictures that have nothing to do with reality." "I kicked your ass," I spat. "I kicked all of your ass." "What's the point? You won all the battles, but lost the war. You're an idiot. You tried everything except what really needed to be done." Vader laughed and took off his helmet. Vader was not he, but Carrie. The pirate and the honest Japanese soldier were also Carrie. I woke up again, just in time to see Dana looking at me again. I'm sure she thought I was going crazy. My music was still playing loudly in the background. I smiled and told Dana I was okay. Everything is fine, and she turned and went to the office. Something about the song clicked in my head, and I grabbed the stereo remote and played the chorus of the song again. Crossing the oceans in my head, finding the strength to say goodbye. Suddenly everything became clear. I dropped the polisher to the floor and sat down to inspect the statue. It was finished. There was nothing more to be done. Early the next morning, my team and I will install it in the bank. It will remain under the scaffolding, covered with thick tarps, under which we will work during bank business hours. Later that evening, all the rich or influential art lovers of the city We'll gather at the bank for the main event of the Art World season. After that, everyone will be wondering what I'll come up with next to top this. And how did that fool Denny think he could do it? I was going to change art and combine it with technology. Nothing would be the same again. I fell asleep that night without any dreams. I was sad because I realized that, like the art world, my life had changed. The next morning, I supervised the transport of the statue and associated equipment to the bank and allowed the team to begin installation. I took Dana to a meeting with my lawyers. She started signing documents because I told her so. I think she thought we were signing some kind of contract whereby she became my business representative. When she realized that I was essentially handing over everything to her, she lost her temper. You're leaving, aren't you?" she exclaimed. I nodded sadly. "Dana, I'm not leaving you," I said. "We'll still be in touch. I promise. We'll even see each other. We'll see each other often, but there's no point in me continuing this anymore." I want to go with you," she said quietly. "Dana, I don't even know where I'm going," I replied. "And someone needs to stay here to look after my business interests and legacy. There's too much money in this to just give up." "What about Carrie?" Dana asked. "She could do it." "Carrie is too busy with her agency," I replied. "She'll be fine. I left her a lot of money in our joint accounts. She probably won't even notice I'm gone." "But she's been calling you nonstop for the past few days. She's been trying to get into the studio to see you." "Too little, too late," I said sadly. "I need you to do something for me," I told her. She nodded. "If you do something for me in return," she said. I grinned and nodded. "You got this, Dana. As long as it doesn't interfere with my plans, I'll do whatever you want for you," I promised her. I quickly explained what I needed her to do. She called our security staff outside the studio and asked one of her assistants to deliver a pass to the event. Then she called you, Carrie, while I was listening. I guess over the years I didn't notice that sweet girl I fell in love with had turned into a bitch. Was it because of the money, or did I just not notice it? As soon as you answered the phone, you were as rude as possible. You asked where I was, and when you found out I wasn't there, you made a scene. Dana maintained her composure and asked if you were going to attend the event that evening. You started again angry, and she calmly reminded you that you hadn't attended any of my performances in over a month, so we weren't sure if you'd come to this one. You immediately fell silent because I think you realized that she was telling the truth. She explained to you that security was tight due to the status of the event and some of the people who were going to attend it. You immediately started screaming because your bums weren't allowed to not only exhibit at the event, but even attend it. She said that it was my decision, and there was nothing she could do about it. You said that as my business representative, you should have been consulted on any changes. I was sure she wanted to tell you that you were fired, but she kept it and carried on with her task. She explained to you that with the security measures we've put in place, you need to pick up your pass immediately, and you have to pick it up in person. You won't be allowed in without a pass. You got angry again and asked why they couldn't leave your pass at the entrance. She explained that none of our guards knew you, and that she and I would be too busy to wait for you. You threw a tantrum again, but you did what I wanted you to do. You left the house so I could leave you my message. Carrie, that was low of me. It was childish and unworthy of me. Later, after a few years, I regretted it, but by then it was impossible to fix it. Carrie stopped me. She cried and wiped her tears. She couldn't speak. She was simply choked with tears. "I have so many questions, Legs," she said. "I never knew that. I mean, I know what you did, and it was more than just sending me a message. It almost destroyed me. It made me realize that there was more to it than just your anger at me. It made me realize that there was a very real possibility that we could be in trouble. But even then—" "What did he do?" Anna asked. "Yes," Dawn echoed. "I never knew all this. I still can't come to terms with the fact that Carrie lied to us for so long." "Remember the picture he painted of me before we got engaged?" asked Carrie. Anna looked at me. "Larry, Legolas, I'll never get used to that name. My dad was a Tolkien fan, I said with a shrug. Hey, I'm lucky. I could be Aragorn. You didn't sell her favorite painting, did you? Anna asked. We need to remember, Anna, I began. I was upset. I was hurt worse than I've ever been in my life. She was everything to me, and losing her was just. He didn't sell it, Carrie said. It's a pity he didn't sell. He left me over $1 million in bank accounts. I probably could have bought it back. I left the house to pick up an event pass, and he came home. He took the painting. Carrie started crying again. He took it out onto our back deck. He took his favorite sword, too. The one I bought him for the first Christmas when we had money. He always carried this sword with him. He broke the sword and burned my picture. Even after all these years, Carrie found it difficult to talk about it. Looking at her, I probably should have felt regret, but it seemed to me that she was more upset by the loss of the painting than by the loss of me. I was so mad at you then, Carrie said. It was the reason I looked terrible at the opening. I still can't drive to that damn bank without crying. Even driving by, I feel pain. You two are in shock, Carrie said, but you have no idea what his action meant. When a samurai breaks his sword, it means a change in life or career. If he breaks it himself, it means that he has given up. He will no longer fight. Connecting this with the fact that he also burned the only picture of me he ever painted, the picture that to me always symbolized his love for me, it changed everything. His message was clear. He would no longer fight for our relationship. In his mind, he needed it. Change. It meant we wouldn't go on vacation to repair our relationship. It meant that if we were to be together, I'd have to fight for us alone. I showed up to his event angrier than ever. I was determined to demand to speak to him. I was going to confront him and tell him that we'd been together too long to let one stupid thing tear us apart. I would admit that I was wrong and lost my head, but that never meant that I didn't love him. And if he loved me as much as he always said, if he was ready to do everything for me, as he always said then, of course he could forgive me at least once. I spent the whole day crying because of what you did and what it meant, Carrie said. I always had this one thought in my head, despite everything else. It was the thought that despite everything, you will always love me and we will always be together. I really thought that you would be angry, but eventually you will understand. Of course, someone who spent almost a month drawing the expression on my face over and over again will understand my desire. We all looked at her like she was crazy. She still couldn't understand that her spiritual quest was a simple and outright betrayal. But this is precisely the tragedy of this situation, Carrie cried. I was looking for what I already had. Legs, I was stupid. I thought of us as equals. I thought we should be the same. But we never were. We were created to complement each other. We were created to be the missing parts of each other's soul. You were my artistic part, just as I was your muse. I laughed and shook my head. She still didn't understand. Legs, that's what your dreams were trying to tell you. You didn't have to fight for what you already had. Even I can see that. You're completely wrong, Carrie, I said. I'm sorry I burned the painting. It hurt me too. And since I broke that sword, I haven't had a sword that I loved enough to carry around with me. Do you want to continue or should I continue? I asked her. She was crying quietly, so I started again. So, after I did what I did, I probably would have spent the day crying too, but something else happened. I came into the studio and found Dana there, and she was crying too. I picked her up and hugged me and said everything would be fine. Dana kissed me. It wasn't a tentative kiss the first time. I've also never done it with anyone but you, Carrie. For months, you slept with your lovers whenever they wanted. You gave them what I thought we had just between us. What happened that day with Dana gave me the strength to say goodbye to you. Can we move on to another one? Carrie said sharply. I don't want to hear you describe how you consoled Dana for her years of service. Even if I knew how it happened, I would forgive you. It was just like my time with my boys. It didn't take anything away from us. Legolas, it was just sex. You didn't even start it. She didn't matter. angry, Carrie?" I asked. "I have my reasons for this. It's not easy listening to your husband describe his sexual encounter with his plump secretary," Carrie replied sharply. "And you, Blondie, you heard me correctly. We're still married." "But Anna began. "Shut up, Blondie," Carrie said sharply. "You want him so bad I can smell it from here. Tell me I'm wrong." Anna just stood there. "You're wrong," I said, noticing that Anna didn't speak anymore. "First of all, what happened between me and Dana was so much more than just sex. It gave me hope, and it really meant something, Carrie. It meant area. We gave each other one day, we gave each other a little part of themselves, and the result was that beautiful girl in the other room." I looked at Carrie, who came closer to me, and asked her, "What do we have with you after all our years together, Carrie? Even now, all I feel when I think about you is pain. The pain of the way you hurt me erases all those years of good memories we had." She looked like I hit her. I think in her mind, all the time we were apart didn't matter. She still lived with those memories of the time when everything was good between us. She couldn't seem to let them go. "Carrie, if you don't like what I'm saying, then you can continue your part of the story," I said. She nodded and started talking again, but she spoke more slowly and was much less confident than before. "Anyway, after I stopped crying," Carrie began, "I got dressed and headed to the bank. There were so many people there. I saw Amanda. I called her, but she didn't even look at me. I tried to approach her, but her guards, although they knew me and called me by name, didn't let me in. And you trained Dana well. The pass that she left for me only allowed me to get to the event itself. I couldn't get into the VIP area. I kept trying to force some people I knew take me there, but no one agreed. I saw Chloe. She was talking to people about her paintings. She was so enthusiastic and smiling. She looked great. At least she waved to me, but obviously she was too busy talking to people who might want to buy or exhibit her work. "I have to be there, damn it. I have to show my work," said a voice behind me. It was Denny, and he was pissed. He began to complain to me that all the exhibitions and galleries with which he had signed contracts had rejected him. He hadn't sold anything in weeks, and he blamed me. Now I know that he should have blamed you. He kept calling me the whore of Babylon and claiming that he was like Samson, and I cut his hair. He could not understand that he himself was partly responsible for what happened to him. It was all someone else's fault. He told me that your statue would suck and no one would like it, and in the meantime, the world would be deprived of the opportunity to see his work. It was a tragedy. Then the announcer began his speech. "I saw the four of you come out from behind the scenes. You came out with Amanda and Raphael on each side. Dana walked behind you. She looked sadder than I've ever seen her. At that moment, I wanted to kill her. But now I feel terrible for her. I felt bad enough. I've been with you most of my life, and I wasn't going to let you go. I was sure that after this show we'd be together again. Together, I was sure she was sad because she was about to lose her place in your life at the moment of your greatest career triumph. The reality was much worse. After all these years of loving you in secret without you noticing, she finally had you for one short day and couldn't get over it. There was also the fact that while I didn't know what was going to happen, she did. And what's worse, you forced her to help you plan your own disappearance. It was two cruel legs. It's like forcing someone to dig their own grave. You started talking, and I've heard that speech before. Well, I didn't hear it, but I read it. I noticed that you left out the parts where you mentioned me, and I got angry when you named Dana as your agent instead of me. But what I was most focused on was that there was something wrong about you. It took me a few minutes to realize that your clothes weren't black, and it wasn't just your favorite sword. Broken on our terrace, you didn't have a sword at all. Then you opened the curtain, and the audience was amazed. It was a huge and beautiful statue. It was the figure of that pirate that is the symbol of the Commerce Bank. He was depicted in the classic pose of the thinker. Camera flashes flashed from all sides. People around me were discussing how alive the statue was. No one could believe it. Even Denny froze in surprise. Then you did it, Legs. You stepped up to the microphone and changed the art world forever. At the same time, you called out Denny without even giving him the honor of a mention. Recently, a very stupid and insignificant person was talking about combining technology and art to upgrade and change them both, you said. The crowd felt like something big was about to happen, but they just weren't ready for it. Legs. You nodded, and the music began to play. The music seemed to lull the crowd into a false sense of security. This was dance music. This was not some menacing classical piece with ominous notes. The crowd was horrified as this 18-foot figure stood up straight and began to dance. When she stomped her foot and pointed at the crowd, several people in the front rows thought that she was attacking and began to run back. Once they realized that this was not a remake of the Godzilla movie and that the statue was just a large robot that I couldn't get off the platform, they started screaming and cheering. Then the robot raised and lowered his huge metal arm, and you sat on his fingers, and he lifted you above the crowd. It was incredible. You were like a rock star. People ran up to me and asked how they could order statues from you for their businesses. Others wanted pictures, and someone else begged me to book you for television shows. Again, I was full of energy until I remembered that I no longer control your career and am not even part of her. This made me depressed again. Obviously, the information that I had been replaced was not yet known to the public. I noticed that Danny was just standing there with his mouth open. He was in shock. He said stupid things about you and Amanda several times. He also practically challenged you with his statements about being the next step in the future of art. He made a fool of himself. It was written all over his face. It's like that old saying, if you mess with a bull, you'll get horns. Even Amanda and Raphael were surprised. I think they had no idea what you had planned. You literally turned the art world upside down and did it almost casually. The only person I saw on stage who I didn't scream or be happy with was Dana. It just didn't fit my mind. As a new agent, I would expect her to be overjoyed. She could demand anything for your work, and your fees for appearing at events would have increased several times. I couldn't understand why she wasn't happy. Right there, in the middle of all this fuss, I called Dana. I told her I knew something was going on. I don't know why, maybe because we had something in common. We both loved you, but she asked me to come to the entrance to the VIP area. I met her there, and she just nodded to the guards, and they let me through. She was already crying when I approached her. "Why are you sad?" I asked her. "You should be happy." She just shook her head. "Where's Legs?" I asked her. "I need to talk to him, Dana." He and Chloe went off to talk about her career away from all the fuss. Dana said sadly, "I'll be her new agent too." "Oh crap, I completely forgot about that," I said. "Don't be so upset, Dana. It's just sex." I can't believe he left the building with the crowd cheering so loud. There's going to be a riot soon if he doesn't come back. He could have waited a little longer to sleep with her. Dana suddenly stopped crying and looked at me. "You really are the stupidest bitch I've ever met," she said. "He's not going to sleep with her. He's giving her his studio. There's even an apartment there where she can live while she works. He's doing everything to help her start her career." "This is wonderful," I said. "So he'll be working from our house again." She just looked at me like I was an idiot. "He's done, Carrie. He won't work anymore. He's gone." Her words made no sense to me. I just stood there, and everything began to spin. I needed to focus on something so as not to lose my balance and not fall. I looked at the huge living statue, which now stood silent and motionless, with his arm outstretched, inviting people to enter the bank. "Do you know how much money he's throwing away?" I asked. She nodded and said he didn't need them. "But what about his art?" I asked. She just looked at me angrily. "Carrie, he never wanted to be famous or rich. He never wanted any of that. He did it all for you. After you betrayed him for his own good, he just needs to get away from it all and from you. He just wants to start his life from scratch somewhere else." "But what about us?" I said out loud. I didn't expect Dana to answer me, but she did anyway. "You literally ruined everything for all of us," she said. simply because of your need to fill your little void. You left an even bigger void in your life, in my life, and in the entire art world. Can you imagine what he could have created? You ruined everything, Carrie. How does it feel, eh? I was too close to tears to respond, so I just turned and walked away, knowing all along that she was right. In addition to depriving myself of the only person I've ever loved, I deprived the entire world of the art that Legs could have created throughout his career. I felt worse than terrible. I immediately ran out of the bank. I got in the car and called him. He didn't answer the call. I was driving through the streets like crazy, trying to get to the studio before he left. He had a big advantage over me. When I arrived, the place looked deserted. There was a light on, so I knocked on the heavy door. I knocked as hard as I could, and I heard someone approach the door. I saw the peephole open, and soon the door opened a little. "Hi, Carrie," she told me. "I think I wanted to talk to you, but today things got out of hand. Legola's sold all the works I showed, and I got almost double the price I asked for. And then he just gave me a building to work with. Until I met him at that art festival in the park, I was a typical starving artist, with a special emphasis on starving. Now I have my own building, a new agent who seems to be able to do something for me, and my reputation has grown significantly, and all this thanks to your husband." She was smiling from ear to ear. "Yes, I'm happy for you," I said. "Is Legola's here?" "No," she said. "He brought me here, showed me around, and left. He has to be one of the most generous people I've ever met. I mean, who just gives a building to someone they barely know. At first I thought that there were some hidden intentions behind all this help that he gave me. You know what they say about you. But he didn't even try to do this and didn't mention it. It seems that there are still good people in the world. He looked sad, though." I couldn't stand by any longer and listen to her talk about what a wonderful man my husband was. I already knew how wonderful he was. I just had to find him. "Did you see how people reacted when that statue moved?" she asked. "This man is a genius." By that time, I was already walking back to the car, so her words did not reach me. When I opened the door, I noticed that my phone was ringing. I answered. It was Dana. Apparently, she didn't want him to leave as much as I did. Her desire for him to stay outweighed even her hatred of me. She told me where he was leaving from. He didn't fly as I assumed. He was leaving on a ship, and it wasn't some big cruise ship. It was a large passenger and cargo ship. It didn't offer all the amenities of a cruise ship, but I suspected part of the reason for choosing it was so it could take its damn cars with it. I raced through the streets again and made it to the dock Dana told me about, just in time to be late. As I ran to the end of the dock, out of breath, the back of the ship was heading out to sea, going to who knows where. If I had been one of those athletic women, I might have been able to jump onto that ship. But with my athletic skills, I would have drowned. I started crying, but I didn't cry like Dana did. In my case, it was deep, soul-wrenching sobs. Then my phone rang. I answered the call. Unbelievably, it was you, Legs. "Please come back," I sobbed into the phone. "We need to talk about this. I can't live without you. Forgive me. I'll never do that again. I promise." "Carrie, it's too late for that," he said quietly. He didn't yell at me or call me names or anything like that. He was just calm. "Why can't we start over?" I asked. "Why can't you forgive me? Give me another chance." "How can we start over?" he asked. "We've fallen so far from where we were before. You'll never find what you're looking for. You need something to fill the void and make up for all those missing parts of you. I hoped for a long time that it would be me. I loved you for everything I had, Carrie. There was no one but you. I could never imagine being with anyone else but you. And I really believed that you thought so too. We believed, but it turned out to be a lie." The phone turned off after that. I just dropped my phone and sank to the ground. A man walked by and looked at me strangely. He asked me if I was late for my ship. I nodded. He told me it wasn't the end of the world. I told him it was the end for me. My heart and soul are sailing to that ship. He smiled and asked what it would cost me to get on this ship. I told him that I would pay him any amount he asked. He took my hand and we ran along the pier. He took me to a small building adjacent to another pier. He introduced me to an even older man with a beard and a pipe. He extended his hand and I opened my purse. "How much?" I asked. "Just give us everything you have," he said. I gave him all the cash I had in my bag. It was about $800. "Sam here is the captain of the pilot boat. He'll be leaving in 10 minutes to guide the ship you missed out of the bay. He often carried passengers who missed the ship. This is the first time we've gotten that much money for it." We boarded a relatively small boat that smelled of old diesel and sardines. Sam steered us through the water and quickly caught up and passed the larger boat. Sam contacted the crew ahead of time, and they were willing to help me board. I searched the entire ship. Neither you nor your cars were on it. You were there just a few minutes before I arrived. I even saw a photo you took with some of the crew. Apparently, you boarded the ship and then left it again. At some point, I think it was all a way to confuse everyone about where you were actually going. I went back to the pilot boat and Sam. He seemed really worried about whether they could keep the money. Right before we docked again, my phone rang. I answered, and you said 2 words, "Goodbye, Carrie." Until today, I never heard from or saw you again. As my father said, I wasted most of my money on private investigators trying to find you. I also tried to keep the agency afloat, but as Dana said, the agency would not have survived without the infusion of money that you invested in it. Without commercially successful artists, I could not save it. When I realized that there would be no more money from you, I was forced to close it. Over time, I thought about selling some of the paintings that you didn't sell. I couldn't get into Chloe's studio. She was working on something and didn't want to be disturbed. Eventually, I found out that you cleared out the studio, and you're right. Dana had everything you left behind. I tried to go to court to get control of your assets as a spouse, but you left signed contracts that determined who would get what in the event of your absence. One of my lawyers was a very smart man. He told me that I should divorce you. Then I would get half of the joint assets. Unfortunately, your lawyer was smarter. You made an inventory of all your paintings and everything else. You gave the paintings Dana as a gift. Therefore, they were not subject to division. You also left me half of our funds at the time of your departure. Any court would have awarded me only half of the assets, so you were clean. Dana and I never got along. When I asked her about the possibility of giving me a loan, she refused. She seemed to blame me for your leaving. I had not seen her in person for over a year. I walked into her office and saw that she had a child. I am not a fan of motherhood, but I saw your eyes' legs. After that, although Dana did not give me a loan, I knew that sooner or later you would find out about Aria and come and see her. What still surprises me is that Dana never told you about Aria. She never dated anyone else after you left. She just ran her agency and took care of your daughter. Today, I found out that you talked to her often on the phone, and she never told you about Aria. I only found out why she didn't do it when she was dying in the hospital. It was love, legs. She wanted you to find yourself again and either come back to her of your own free will or call her to you. She never wanted tying you up or forcing you to be part of something against your will would be too similar to what I did, I think. She only thought about you, legs. She just wanted you to be happy. I was crazy. I couldn't adapt to life without you. First, I went into a bottle, and then I fell into depression. I was always on the edge of depression. But now that I've found you, everything will be better. Now that you found me, I'll have to leave again, I said. It's really a shame. I've come to really love this place and my life here. I love the people and my job. Do you like teaching art to children? Asked Carrie. Okay, we'll live here. No, Carrie, I said sharply. We can't live anywhere. It took me a long time to find this place, and even longer to find myself. After I left the art world, I spent 6 or 7 months living in Amon's house in France. I wandered around Europe for a while. I liked the culture and the people. They enjoy life more than we do here. It seems like everything revolves around the constant desire to accumulate money. So few people really love what they do for a living. I really loved my job, but I'll find another life and another job. But I'm keeping my daughter, Carrie. Legs, why can't we try again? She asked me. I never stopped loving you, and I know that you still feel something for me. And even your dreams told you that we should be together. Why can't you stop being stubborn and just go along with it? We meant to be together. I looked at her and shook my head. Carrie, you misunderstood the meaning of my dreams, just like I did, I said. You thought the dreams meant I didn't have to fight because I already had just what I was looking for. But that was not the case. In the first dream, I tried to save you by attacking as hard as I could, and I failed. In the second, I tried to use cunning and just go with the flow, and I also failed. In the third dream, I sacrificed myself to save you, and I failed again. The meaning of the dreams was that there was no way to save you. No matter what I tried, I couldn't do it, because in the end I had to fight you. The only way to win was to just leave and save myself and my own sanity. I loved you, Carrie, with everything I had. But if you wanted to go and sleep with a bunch of bums, there was no way I could stop you and find out that you did it. Hurt me more than I could ever imagine. Every time I see you, I imagine you having sex with some guy who used to be an artist and now works at Wendy's. One of the most important things between us was that it was always just us. It was kind of magical and otherworldly. Once you let other people into it, the magic disappeared. We became like any other couple. You know, how were you always looking for something that you were missing? That's how our relationship felt after I found out what you were doing. It felt like something was missing, and we couldn't get it back. And what you think you see in me is not what you think. You don't see in me love for you, Carrie. You just see the dying embers of what we were. You coming here is good. It's allowed me to see that things are still not what I thought. I always thought I would never fall in love again or even want to. I always swore there would be no one else for me, Carrie. Now I see that I am too much. I've been holding on to these dying coals for a long time. It's time to move forward and live my life. I crossed the oceans in my head to find the strength to say goodbye to you, Carrie, but I never said it face to face. I said goodbye on the phone, but that was a cowardly and really cheap way to do it. After everything we've been through together, you deserve to have it happen like this. I stood up and approached her. I picked her up and hugged her tenderly. Goodbye, Carrie, I said, smiling. Enjoy the rest of your life. Find someone new. Legolas, she said sadly, with large tears rolling down her cheeks. Who? I asked. My name is Larry. Larry Martin. I'm an art teacher. Dan picked Carrie up and began to lead her out of my house. Before they got to the door, I stopped them. When Dana died, control of my art and assets returned to me. Tomorrow I'll file for divorce in case I decide to remarry. I'll give you some money, Carrie, but don't waste it because there won't be any more. When they left, I felt better. Anna came up behind me. She wrapped both arms around my waist. Are you really going to stay here? She asked. Yeah, I have to stop running at some point, I said. So did you mean what you told her about maybe getting married again? She asked. Yes, I said. I need to raise my daughter. She will need a female role model and maybe brothers and sisters. Do you have anyone in mind? She asked. Well, I said, I thought Melissa Crane's mom was very unhappy in her marriage. Nope, she said. Mrs. Crane doesn't have breasts. Remember what you liked about Dana. Oh, right, I said. I will have to find someone, but it has to be someone who will love me. I couldn't marry someone just for breasts. Do you know someone like that? Well, perhaps I might be interested, she said, unbuttoning her blouse. But before you can ask me, you have to do something for me. What exactly? I asked, following her down the corridor. I want a painting, she said, taking off her trousers and kicking them aside. I have a few left, I said. You can take any one you want. No, she smiled. I want a new one. I want a special painting. Remember that painting of Carrie where you caught the look on her face right after you made love? I want that one. But we'll have to, I began. Exactly, she said. Anna and I did get married, and we had 2 more children, a boy and a girl, besides Aria. Anna always treated Aria like her own daughter. They are especially close. We saw Carrie several times over the years before she died at just 40. She never got over our divorce. While I'm not glad she's gone, I'm glad she's finally at peace. Her soul was restless throughout her life. Perhaps she found the missing parts of herself in the afterlife. One strange event happened several years after our other children were born. Anna and I took our children to New York to visit museums and see some of my work. After we left the last museum, we stopped at Wendy's. The guy who made the fries there looked very familiar to me. He looked at me angrily, and I was sure it was Denny. I'm sure he'll find a way to combine French fries and art and turn the art world on its head. Give him time. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.